We're going to build a full authentication system using the MERN Stack, which stands for MongoDB, Express, React, and Node.js. We're going to build a login functionality with a register functionality. We're also going to see if the user's logged in or not. We're going to give them logout ability. We're also going to send a verification email upon registration and allow them to reset their password as well. If this sounds interesting to you, you need to hit that like button and also subscribe for more content just like this, because that would help others just like yourself see this content on YouTube. But other than that, let's jump into the code and get started. Let's do a quick walkthrough and demo of the application we are going to build in this video. It's a full authentication app, and the first thing is the user could register for a new account. So they have to enter their name, their email, and the password. And what this does, it creates a user in the database, but they have to verify the email address. So we do send them a verification code to their email. So if you look at it, we just got a verification code sent to the email. It's a 6-digit code. We could copy this and then paste it into the verification code system and click verify email now. So now we get a message saying our email was verified successfully. And what we can do here is we could just go over to the dashboard page, and we are now logged in because we have a verified email. So it gives us some information like welcome Brett, which is my name, and it is displaying my email as well. So we're displaying user information on the dashboard page. If we try to go back to the login page, it is going just to redirect us back to the dashboard page. And the reason why is because if the user is logged in, they shouldn't be able to see the login or sign up page. We also give them the ability to log out. So if they log out, they are redirected to the login page. And if we try to go to the dashboard page, it is a protected route, which means they don't have access to it. They have to log in. So now let's log in. And now let's go to the dashboard page. And now we are back on the dashboard page. Let's log out one more time and let's showcase the last feature we're doing, which is the forgot password. So if you forget your password and you can't log in, you could enter the email address associated with your user account, click reset password, and a password reset email was sent successfully. So we check our email, and as you can see, we have click here to reset your password. We click, it opens up a reset form. So we could do our new password. We could do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We click reset password, and your password reset was successful. Now you could go back to logging in, and you could log in with the new password. So that is what we're going to create in this video, and hope you guys are excited as much as I am, but let's get to it. First thing you need to do is download Visual Studio Code, which is a code editor and it allows you to create code. Secondly, make sure you have Node.js on your local device. If not, just go to nodejs.org and download it to your local computer. You can use the latest stable version and you'll now be able to create backend and server code, which is involved in the MERN Stack, which is Node.js, or we're going to use the Express framework on top of Node.js. I am now on my desktop, and the first thing we need to do is create a new folder. It could be on your desktop or anywhere on your computer. So I'm just going to right click, click new, and then folder. I'm going to name this MERN YouTube tutorial. And then after you have VS Code downloaded onto your computer, we are going to open up a new VS Code editor, right? So we're going to open up, and then I'm going to drag it on my screen. You could click out of the welcome message, and what we could do here is all we have to do is drag and drop the folder into our code editor like that. And as you can see, let me zoom in. We have our folder called MERN-YouTube-tutorial right here on the left-hand side. And what we want to do is we're going to create two folders within this main folder. The first one is going to be called frontend, and the second one is going to be called Backend, just like that. Next, we need a package.json file for our whole project. And what this is, it's pretty much the manifest file, and it describes the metadata in the project that you are currently working on. So to do this, we're going to open up our terminal. You can go here at the top and click View and Terminal, or you can do the shortcut Control plus backtick. So I'm just going to do the shortcut. It is going to open up the terminal. And what we have here is we have a terminal within VS Code. Next, we're going to be on the root layer of our project, so the main layer right here. And we are going to run the command npm init, and then with the flag -y. So this means it's going to answer every question when it comes to creating a package.json file for us. So if you don't do -y, you just have to manually answer it. And they're easy questions, just pretty much describing what the project is about. So we're going to press enter. And this is going to create a package.json on the root layer. And as you can see, it has a name, a version, description, a main entry point, and we're defining the file right here. We have scripts, keywords, the author, and the license. So, I mean, you could manually edit this yourself. So my name, Brett Westwood, I mean, this isn't necessary, but you could do anything you want, description, etc., etc. Now that we have the package.json file, I want to install all the packages that we're going to use for the backend code, the server code. So we're going to start with the backend for this video, and then after we complete the backend, we are going to go to the front end. And we're going to test the backend with a popular API tester called Postman. So that's how we're going to test our backend, even though we don't have a front end. So first, let's go over some of the packages we're going to install. So npm I is to install packages, and they're going to go inside of your package.json file, as you're going to see here in a minute. The first one is going to be Express. This is just the framework that is pretty much over Node.js. It allows us to create more modern code for server applications and projects. Next, we are going to have a cookie parser. And what this is, it allows us to parse a cookie from the request. This is going to be very important when we're using JSON Web Tokens. The next one we're going to do is called resend. And resend allows us to programmatically send emails through our code to our users. So for example, when they have to reset their password or the verification email, we could use resend as an email service provider, or you could use a bunch of different other ones that are on the web. Another one is going to be bcrypt. So it's bcrypt.js, bcrypt.js. And this is going to allow us to hash passwords. So the users that are in our database, their passwords are going to be hidden and secured just in case, somebody hacks your database, at least your users' passwords are still secured. We also have a .env. This is going to allow us to load environment variables from your .env file into a process.env code directive. So we're pretty much essentially going to be able to see the variables and use the variables from the env files in our code by using this package. Another one is the jsonwebtoken. And this allows us to create tokens and decode them for authentication. We have Mongoose as well. This is going to allow us to interact with our database, call different functions and methods that allow us to do very cool stuff within our database and application. And these are going to be the packages that we need for now. So we're just going to click enter, and it is going to install these packages onto our project. And you're going to see them pop up in the package.json file right here as the dependencies. And it's also going to create a package-lock.json file and a node modules folder. The node modules folder, you don't need to even touch it. It's good to go. And as you can see, we have the dependencies with the different versions as well. So the main entry point is defined inside the package.json and is the index.js file. We need to create this inside of our backend folder. So what we can do here is we could say new file, and we could do index.js like this. We could go back to our package.json file, and then instead of just index, it's actually inside the backend /index.js like that. So that is our main entry point. And this is now our time to set up the Express framework so we could actually code our backend. And first off, you're going to usually import using the React, the old way of doing it. I forgot the name of it. It'll come to my mind when I see it, but it's called like const express equals require express like this. And that's pretty much the old way of doing it and the default way when it comes to Node.js. But we could switch that by going into our package.json and defining a type. So we're going to go type, and then we could look at the two types. It's common.js. So common.js is the old way, the way I just showed you with the require syntax. And the module type is the way with the import and export syntax. So we're going to go to module, and we could come back to index.js, and we could do import express from express like that. So that allows us to do this import syntax, which I like, which is cleaner and more of the modern way of doing it. Okay, so after we do that, let's initialize our express app, saying const app equals express, just like that. We're calling the function, and then we must listen to it on a port. So it has the method app.listen, and it takes in two parameters. The first one is the port, so we could define it as like 3000. Then it has a function for the second parameter, and we have an anonymous function, and we just console log what server it's running on. So we have a console.log, server is running on port 3000. So this is 7 lines of code that initializes an Express app. So what we can do here is inside of the terminal, we can either cd into it, or we could just run the command node and then backend /index.js. So whatever file you want to listen to with Node, you just define it here and make sure it's the correct path. And all we're going to do is press enter. And we get the console here on the server is running on port 3000. So that means it is working. But there is one more package that we need to install, which is going to significantly improve your coding efficiency. And this is called Nodemon. So let me show you why it's going to improve your coding. So we are going to create a route real quick, just quickly here on the main file. It's going to be the home page, and it's going to take in the request response. And then what we're going to do here is we're going to do a res.send hello world. Okay. So we're going to go to our browser. We're going to open up localhost 3000. And as you can see, nothing updated. It says cannot get the request of this page. But let's refresh this, because technically we're supposed to see the text hello world. And we did create this after we ran the server, right? So now let's do the same command, node backend /index.js. Come back here, refresh the page. Now it says hello world. So for example, say if you want to add an exclamation mark after hello world, let's add it. Let's make sure we press Control S to save our code. Come back here, refresh, and we can't see the update. There's no exclamation mark behind here. So that means we have to stop our server again and run it again. So the best way to avoid this is by installing the Nodemon package. So we're going to do npm I Nodemon with a -d. This means it's going to be a dev dependency, right? Because all we need is the development. I was getting tongue twist there. My fault, guys. So we have a package.json, and you can see we have the dev dependency Nodemon with the version. So what we can do here is we can create a script for this. So inside the scripts in the package.json, we could create anything we want. Very easy convention is dev, and then is going to be Nodemon backend /index.js like that. So anytime we run npm run dev, it's going to run this command. So let's go over here, run npm run dev, and now it is watching the port and watching the specific file if any changes are being made. And this is the main file, right? So if we go back to our code, refresh, we have the exclamation mark. So say if we want to add another exclamation mark, we save, we go back to the code, just refresh the page, and voila, it's there. So that we don't have to keep resetting the server, it's watching for changes. That is what Nodemon's doing, and it makes your coding life a lot easier. So make sure you definitely add that, and also add the script for that as well inside of your package.json. So let's create a database inside of MongoDB. So let's just go to google.com, type in MongoDB, click here, and then you can log in with your GitHub, your Google, or you can create an email account with a password. So I'm just going to log in with my Google account. Choose your correct account. And I'm going to take you step by step on how you need to create your database. So at the top left here, what we can do is these are all my projects that I've created a database with, but if you come down to the bottom or it's at the top, if you don't have any projects, you click new project, right? And what we could do here is we could just do MERN tutorial YouTube, just like that. And then you're just going to press next. You don't have to add any tags, and then press create project. And this is going to take a few seconds to load. And now we're going to create a cluster. You should be on a page like this. Let me just increase the size real quick so you guys can see better. So we're going to create a cluster. And we are going to go with the free tier. That's plenty enough for the project we are creating. We don't need to put in a credit card or anything like that. We can keep the cluster name as is, but you cannot change the name once the cluster is created. We're going to use the provider AWS. And you should pick your region, which is the recommended region, which looks like all of them are to me. But pick the region that is closest to where you live. And then press create deployment. Okay, so this is very important. So you're going to have to create a username. So I like creating my username like this. And then you could create a password or use this one. So we're going to copy this password. We're going to go over to our VS Code. Just come in the index, create a comment, and then just paste that there. And then we're going to go back. And then we're going to click create database user. And then we're going to choose a connection method. We're going to click drivers. And right now it says our cluster is still provisioning, so we can't actually connect to our database. So when it's done provisioning, we are going to add that. So as you can see here, it's being created. So after a few minutes, the cluster has been provisioned and created. So we could click this connect button right here. We could connect it using a drivers. We come down here and we copy this connection string. So we're going to copy this. We're going to come here, and I am going to create a .env file, right? This is going to be on the root, so we're just going to click here, .env. And then what I'm going to name this is Mongo _ URI equals, and then you paste that string. Okay, so the string looks like this. And there's a few things we have to adjust with the string to make it actually work with our application. And first off, you see this DB password. That is the password that we copied here. So let's copy that. We can remove this comment. And we are going to replace this right here with that password. And also make sure nobody has access to this database connection string, because they could actually go into your database and start stealing people's information and just messing with your application. So make sure this is hidden and inside a .env file. Another thing is before the question mark and after the slash, we can create the cluster of where the information is going to be stored. So for us, we can just do users. You can name it whatever you want. This is after the slash. And if you don't have anything after the slash, it's going to be stored in a collection called test. And you'll see what I'm talking about when we actually look at the database. But now we save that. And anytime you do make changes inside of a .env file, you should reset your server, restart it, and then start it back up so you can actually see the changes that are being made. So we don't need to go back to MongoDB for now for any connection issues. So we could press done here, come back to our code. And actually, let's go back and do one more thing. So for the network access, you can come into it like this and you can click add IP address, and we could add one where they allow access from anywhere. We just click this, and this is the IP address that anybody could access the database as long as you're logged into your account. Because if you don't do this, you can only access it based off the IP that you're currently logged in as. So this is always a good practice to make sure it's available just in case it doesn't come and bite you in the butt later on when you're trying to actually push to production and you're trying to do it on different computers. So there's that. And I'm just going to click overview so we could get back to this main section for the database. And what we're going to do here is we are going to create a function that connects our database. So I'm going to create a folder inside the backend called database. Some people call it DB. Same thing, it's just short for database. We're going to create a file in here. We could call it connection to database.js. Might be a little bit of a long name, but it's easy for me to see. And what we're going to do is we're going to use that package we installed earlier called Mongoose, and that's going to be from Mongoose. We're going to create a function and export it. So export const, and we could say connect to database. This is going to be an asynchronous function because it is going to take time to do queries into a database, right? We're going to have a try catch just in case something fails. We could console in the catch. We're going to do const connection equals await. We're going to use mongoose dot connect. So that's a method that Mongoose allows us to do. And then this is where the connection string is going to be, right? So we don't want to put the connection string directly in here because it could be vulnerable to attacks and people could then see that key. What we need to do is we need to use the process.env. Whatever we named it, so Mongo _ URI. And then we could do a second parameter in here, which is going to be different options. So if we press control like this, we can see the different options. That's actually not working right now, so we're not going to have a second option in here. But I know there is second options, and you can look at the docs of Mongoose to see what else you could pass into the connect. But all we're going to do here is we're going to do a console.log if successful. And we're going to say MongoDB connected to connection.connection.host. And the way we're getting this value is if you console.log the connection, just the connection variable that we're getting from this, you're going to see that there's an object called connection and then a property of host, and that's going to give us the value. So what we're going to do here in the catch, we could just do a console.log and then error, and then just do the error message. We could do error connecting to MongoDB. Okay. So technically we're going to get an error. The reason why is because we did download a package called .env, and that allows us to read this variable from the env file, which we haven't even imported yet. But I do want to run this so I can show you guys the error. So what we're going to do is we're going to call this function inside of our index.js file because that's the only one that's being watched right now, right? So what we can do here is connect to database, make sure it's imported at the top. And then also too, you have to add the .js inside of Express like that. So what we can do is press Control S. And you can see here in the console, we have an error connecting to MongoDB. The URI parameter must be a string. Instead, we got undefined. So it's pretty much, there's no value associated with this connection right here, this connection variable. So there's no value. So the reason why is because we have to use the .env variable, package. So let's go inside of our index.js and let's import .env from .env, and then we also have to configure it as well. So .env .config, and then call that, and let's save it. And now you can see we're not getting an error message. We are getting connected to this specific cluster. So now our database is successfully connected to our application. So we are going to now define the types and data structure of how our user is going to look inside of our database. So to do that, we have to create a model by using the Mongoose package. So in our backend, we're going to create a new folder called model. And in bigger applications, you're going to see a bunch of different schemas that are defined. But for ours, right now, we're just going to create a user schema. So we could create a file inside of here called user.js. And first thing we're going to do is we're going to import Mongoose from Mongoose like that. And then we're going to define a variable called user schema. This is very common and default. We're using new mongoose.schema. And this is going to take in an object with the data types that we're going to define for the user. So we need to define how the user is going to look and what we want to take in. So when the user signs up, we want to get their name, their email, and their password. Then we also are going to send a verification email. So we're going to see if they're verified or not. So we need a field for that. And we also are going to have a password reset. So we need a reset password token and when it expires, and then the verification token and when that expires as well. So what we're going to do is first is we need the name, and we could just do like this. And the name, we could create an object like this, which type would be string. It has to be capital S. And then we could do required as true. Next, we are going to have the email. This email is going to be of type string. It is going to be required as true. And it will be unique, right? Because we only want one email per account, per person, and we don't want any duplicate emails. So that's why we have the unique identifier right there. Next, we're going to have password. And this is going to be of type string and required true. Next, we could have a field called is verified. It is going to be of type Boolean, so it's true or false. And default, it's going to be false. Nobody's going to have a verified email, so it's going to be false by default. And then after that, we are going to have a reset password token. And all we have to do is just define a here. That's going to be a string. It's not going to be required because if somebody doesn't want to reset their password, there's no reason to require it. We're also going to have a reset password expires at. This is going to be date. We're going to have a verification token, which will be a string, and then a verification token expires at, which is going to be date. And then all we have to do is come down here. We have to export this function. So we're going to call it const user with a capital U, mongoose dot model, and it is going to be the user with a capital U. And then inside of there, we have the user schema like that. So now we could use this inside different files to make sure to create new users, to check to make sure all the fields are correctly getting sent back to our database, and so forth. If you do want to see how and where to find information on Mongoose, you can go to mongoosejs.com/docs. I will link it in the description below so you guys can get to it easy. But here's the docs. And as you can see here, we're using the mongoose.connect method right here. You have different schemas. It explains how you can create a schema right here like we did and such forth. So these are the docs. You could definitely go through them and understand the code that we just did a lot better. Okay, so now let's actually get our code organized and create our routes and our handler functions. So the first thing we want to do is we don't want everything inside of our index.js file because that code will be messy and we need to get things organized. So first off, I'm going to create inside the backend folder another folder called routes. And what the routes are essentially is just they're going to be associating your HTTP requests. So it could either be like a GET request, a POST request, delete request, pull request, and so forth. So stuff like that, we're going to define the routes inside of the route folder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another file inside the route folder called auth. And then you could do -route.js. You can name this file whatever you want. I'm just naming it that for right now. And what we are going to do inside of the routes is we are going to import Express. And we're going to use a middleware that Express provides us. So that's why we're importing it here. So what we're going to do is we are going to define a variable called router. So const router, and it's going to equal express.router like this. So this is a middleware for us to use to create routes. So for example, we could create a route like this, router dot, and then whatever the method is. So for now, we could just do get, and then we could do the endpoint path, which the first one we could do is called sign up. And then what we could do for the second parameter is the handler function, okay? So the handler function takes in the request and the response. And then is an arrow function. And what we could do is we could just do a res.send and then call it like sign up route like this. So right now, this route will not work because we are listening to the index.js file, which is the main entry point for our server side, right? So what we have to do now is we have to go over to our index, but before that, we should actually export the route at the bottom so we could use it inside of our index file. So we're going to do an export default router like this. And since it is a default export, we could use any name we want inside of our index.js file. If we just export it without the default and we say export router, that's going to be a named export, which means you have to use the same name that you exported as. So there's a difference between a named export and a default export. So that is just one of the differences. So we're going to go into our index.js, and what we are going to do is we're going to use app.use. So app.use pretty much allows us to use and add the router to the middleware handling path. So what we're going to do is we're going to do an app.use like this. And right here, you could pass a bunch of different middlewares into this, but the first one we are going to do is we're going to get the router, right? So we could do a prefix of how the API routes are going to be. And we're going to do a pretty conventional syntax that a lot of people do for API routes, which starts with /API. And then since we're doing authentication, /auth. So for example, if your website's google.com, the API route will be google.com/API/auth. And then we are going to import, we could call these auth routes like this. So what we can do at the top here is we can import auth routes from, and then we go outside of this specific file, we go to routes, and then we go into the auth route.js like this. And like I said, we are getting this from this export default here, and we can name it whatever we want inside of the index.js, which I named it auth routes. So now this is going to prefix every endpoint that we defined inside of our routes. So the first route is going to be /signup. So it's going to be google.com/API/auth/signup. So that is how you're going to be able to access this route. And when we go to that specific page, or that specific endpoint, more so the specific endpoint, you're going to see the text sign up route. So let's run our development server. So npm run dev if you don't have it running. And what we can do here is I'm going to open up localhost 3000 because that's where our port is. And then we are going to go, let's zoom in. It's going to be /API /auth /sign up. And as you can see, there's the text sign up route. So this specific endpoint is working correctly. So what we're going to do is we're going to create 2 more of these specific endpoints because we're going to have 2 more endpoints that we're going to create right pretty much the bat. So I'm just pressing Shift Alt and the down arrow to copy whatever I highlighted. So now we have a sign up route. We're also going to have a login route, right? So the user is going to sign up. They're going to also be able to log in, and they're also going to be able to log out. We're also going to have more endpoints potentially, but for now, these are going to be your 3 main ones, and then we could separate these to make them better. And then let's just change this path. So this one could be the login endpoint, and then this one would be the logout. And what we can do here is we could just name this login route. And then this will be named logout route. And just to make sure, press Ctrl S to save. Let's open up our localhost 3000 again, and let's test these routes. So we have a login route, changes to login route text, and then we have a logout, right? So all of our endpoints are correctly working, and all we are doing is sending a simple string to that specific endpoint. Now, it is definitely more organized, but we could even get more organized than this. So what this second parameter is inside of this router.get is called a handler function. This is where all of the logic is happening and where you're actually doing all of the code. And if you keep it inside this routes folder, it is going to get really messy and hectic. And technically this file is supposed to just be for defining your routes, correct? So what we want to do is we want to create a folder called controllers inside the backend. So we're going to create a controllers folder. And inside of this, we could create a file called auth-controller.js, just like that. And what we're going to define in here are the handler functions. So for example, in the routes, we have a sign up endpoint. So what we can do inside of the controllers is we can create a function and export it called sign up. So sign up equals, and it's the same thing. This is a handler function. It's going to be just defined in here. It's going to equal a function and then res.signup route. And since we're exporting it, we can import it inside the routes. So we can remove all of this here and then just do sign up. It'll be imported at the top, and then just make sure you add the .js at the end, and then everything should be working. And if we go to the sign up route, everything should work correctly, and this code looks a lot cleaner inside of your route folder. So let's go back to localhost 3000. Let's go to the sign up endpoint. And as you can see, no errors, nothing's good, and the server is running correctly inside of our terminal. So now we're just going to do it for the rest of these the rest of the 2, the login and the logout route. So what I could do here is I could just do Shift Alt down, and then it copies it 2 more times for us. And what we can do here is we can have the login function, the handler function, and we could have the logout handler function. And for this, we could just put login route. And for this, we could put logout route. And now let's import these into our routes right here. So remove this anonymous function. Let's just import that login. It imports automatically for me. And if it doesn't, make sure you add it here. It's from the same path as the sign up. And then let's remove this anonymous function here. And let's do logout. And it imports here at the top. And as you can see, our server is running and all of the routes and endpoints are working and everything's a lot more organized. So now we are ready to actually get started with our sign up route handler and test it inside of our MongoDB database. So when creating the sign up handler function, we need to think of it in a logical way. And when the user signs up, they are going to provide us their name, their email, and the password. And we actually define this data structure inside of our user model using Mongoose. So you could always reference back to that file inside of your model folder. But for us, we are going to destructure the name, email, and password, and this is going to become from the request.body. So whenever the client side sends us this information, we're getting the request and it's going to be in the body. And when we are receiving requests from the body, from the client side, we do need to pass a middleware to our index.js file so we can actually be able to read that data. And to do that, we're going to do app.use express.json. And what this does, it pretty much parses data that is in the application/JSON format. So we are able to read it. Okay, so let's go back to our auth controller. And what we can do underneath this is we can do a try catch. And inside the try, the first thing we need to do is we need to see if they actually gave us a name, email, and password. So if there's no name, email, or password, what we can do is we could throw an error, or you can return a status 400 with the JSON message. So as you can see, Copilot is recommending me to do that. So that's all we're doing here is we're doing an if check if there's name, email, and password. If not, return this message. Next, we want to also check if we already have the user in our database. So to do this, we could name a variable called const user already exist. And this is going to await. And we're going to use user, capital U, and we need to import this at the top because this is going to be our model. So we need to start doing methods inside of our database, and to do that, we're going to have to import it from the model, right? So it's going to be curly braces, it'll be user like this, and it is going to come from the model, and then user.js file. So we're going outside of this controllers folder, inside the model folder, and inside the user.js. And we are going to do user.find1. So we're going to find one, and then make sure you're doing it with a unique identifier. So what I mean by that is if we check inside of our model, right, the name isn't unique, but the email is. So we're going to check if the user by their email, because obviously there's only one email with one account at all times, no matter what. So we're going to see if that user exists based on their email. And then we're going to do if the user exists, we can return a status of 400 with the message of user already exists. So as you can see, we're just doing a bunch of checks to make sure that they can actually sign up successfully. Next, if those checks do pass, what we want to do is now we want to add extra security in our database, and we want to hash the password. So we're going to do const hashed password, save it in this variable, and we're going to await, and we're going to say bcrypt. And what we're going to do is we're going to import bcrypt at the top. So we're going to import bcrypt from, and this is coming from bcrypt.js. So that is a package we installed earlier. So what we can do here is they have a method called .hash, and this allows us to hash the password. So it pretty much gives you random values where it's hard for somebody to decode it, even if they got access to your database. So what we're going to do is we're going to pass in the password as the first parameter. And the second one is called the salt, and we're going to do 10, which is the default value that is used for the salt. So I guess the salt is pretty much how the password gets hashed and what bcrypt uses in their source code. So now after we get the hash password, it is stored in this variable here. Next, we want to look at what we need to send to our database. So what we have to do is we have to name, the email, the password is verified. By default, it's false, so we do not have to send that specific value to the database, but we do need to get the verification token, and the verification token expires because after they do sign up, we do want to send a verification token so they can verify it, make sure they have access to the email, and make sure it's their actual email address and not some random email address that they gave us that they have no access to. And as you can see, it's not required, so there won't be an error if you don't do this step. But since it is a step that I want to do in this tutorial, we're going to make sure we create a verification token. So what we're going to do is we're going to say const verification token. equals, and then we are going to create a function in a different folder. Even though you could do it here, I just want to be more syntactically more correct when it comes to organizing. So what we're going to do is we're going to call a function called generate verification token. We're going to call it, and obviously there's no function that we created, generate verification token, so this won't work. So what I want to do is I want to create this in a different folder and file. So in the backend folder, let's create a folder called utils. In the utils, let's create a file called generate verification token.js. And this is what we're going to call the function. It is a very easy function. We're going to export it first off. Export const generate verification token. And let's do an arrow function. And what we're going to do here is we're going to do a math.floor. So just a JavaScript method. And then what we're going to have in here is 100,000 plus math.random. We're going to do times it by 9,000. Let me just move this down here. And then let's just do this as a toString. So this is going to create a random verification token that has 6 digits. So this is what this does. And we're exporting it here. So let's go to our actual sign up function. Let me collapse the terminal down here so we have more room to look at. And let's import this generate verification token at the top. And that's coming from the utils and then generate verification token.js. Make sure you have that at the end, .js. So we're generating the verification token, storing it in this variable right here. Next, what we're ready to do is actually create the user in our database. So we're going to say const user equals a new capital U user. And we are going to pass in the name, right? The email, the password, which is going to be the hashed password for better security. We are also going to pass in the verification token, which is the verification token. And if it is the same exact word, you only have to write it once, but I do like writing it twice. That's just my preference. And then we have the verification token expires at. And we are going to modify this a little bit. So we are going to make sure it expires after 24 hours. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do plus 24 times 60 times 60 times 1,000. And this will be 24 hours. So they have 24 hours to verify their email address. If not, they're not going to be able to, and they're going to have to try to re-sign back up. So after the user is created here, we have to await the user.save to actually save it in the database. Perfect. Next, what we want to do is we want to generate a JWT token. So that JSON web token package we installed at the beginning, we're going to use it now. So we are going to create another function that is not within this specific file. So we're going to call it generate JWT token. And what we can do here is we're going to have to pass in a few things so we can have access to it inside this function. So we could pass in the parameters is the response because we need to set a cookie. And the second thing we could do is we could pass in the user._ID. So MongoDB, they save each user with a unique identifier, and the unique identifier's specific what's it called, property is _ID. Most databases probably have ID, but MongoDB does the syntax of _ID. So that's where I'm getting this from. MongoDB creates an ID for each user. So we're passing it into this function. And so now let's create this function. So in the utils folder, I'm going to create a new file called generate JWT token.js. And we're going to create it within this specific file. So what we're going to do is we're first going to import that package, right? So JWT from jsonwebtoken. Now let's create the function export const generate JWT token. It's going to be an arrow function, and what is going to be accepted from the front end, from where we call the function, is the response and the user ID. And I don't know if I explained it specifically, but the reason why we're passing the user ID is because each JWT token that's in the cookie has a payload, and we want to be able to match the JWT token to the specific user. And the best way to do that is with the user ID. So it'll make more sense when we start coding it, but that is the main reason. So we're going to create a variable called token. We're going to use the JWT dot. They have a method called sign inside of their package. And what we're going to do is the first thing we're doing is we are passing in the payload. So it's going to be the user ID. Okay. And then second is you need to have a secret. So this secret needs to be not accessible to anybody, and it allows you to decode the JWT token. So we're going to do a process.env.jwt_secret like this. And we haven't created that yet, but we're going to add one more option. And this option is going to be expires in. And we could do it in 1 day, 7 days, a week, whatever you want. We'll do 2 weeks, we'll do 7 days. And let's also create this JWT secret. So we're going to go to our .env file, paste it here, and then we could do it any value you want, but we're just going to say my secret token. Obviously make it better in production, but that's going to be the secret for this specific file. So now after we generate the token and create it, let's store it inside of our response cookie. Let's in a cookie so we could track the users, right? So we're going to say token. That's going to be the name. We're going to name it, and then we're going to pass in the token we just created. And then we could pass in a few options down here to make it secure, and it gives us different options on how we want to secure it. So HTTP only, we're going to say true. And what this does, if we do comments like this, cookie cannot be accessed by client-side scripts. I'm not an expert when it comes to security, but these are good parameters to add. We're also going to do secure. We're going to have a process.env.node_env. And if this equals production, so this will only equal production when it's in production, the cookie will be secured only when we have the HTTPS. The reason why we're doing this is because right now we use localhost, which has HTTP. So it doesn't have the extra security. And so we want to make sure it's secured when it's running on an actual production ready site. We're also going to do same site, and we're going to say strict. And what this does is the cookie will only be set on the same site. And then let's do the max age as well for the cookie. And what we can do here is it's giving a recommendation of 7 days, and we are going to do 7 days as well. So after this, we're just going to return the token. And now we have this function which creates the token and stores it inside of a cookie called generate JWT token. So now we could go back to the auth.controller. And what we can do now is we can import this generate JWT token function at the top. So as you can see here, it's at the top imported. And what I did here is I just went to the end of the function name. I pressed Control space, and VS Code allows you to auto import it when you click here. And that's what allowed me to auto import it here. So I pressed Control space at the end of the function name. So now we generated the token. We saved it to our database. Now let's just send a status back of 201. Which means it was successful, and we also created something. Let's send a JSON back, a message, and we can say user was created successfully. We also could add more stuff to this message. So I'm just going to press enter so it's cleaner. Let's have a success, and then we're going to put true with the comma. Let's do another comma here. And then let's pass back some of the user information. So we're gonna just use the spread syntax. So spread throughout all the user ._doc. So like I said, we're using this because MongoDB you can access the whole user document by using the _doc like that. And then, but we don't want to also send the password back. So let's manually define it and say it's undefined. So this allows us not to send the password back to our client because we shouldn't for security purposes. Okay, and then the catch, let's just do a res.status. We could do this a 400.json. And what we can do is we could just send a message with the error.message, and we can do a success of false with a comma like that. So that's the try catch, and that is the whole signup function created. So what we need to do now is we need to test this out. And you're probably asking, we don't have a front end, how we can test it out? Well, you can use this cool website called Postman. You can also use the extension Postman inside of VS Code. If you just go to your extensions tab, wherever my extensions tab is, I don't know why it's right here, and just type in Postman. And you're going to be able to streamline API development and testing with the power of Postman directly inside of VS Code. But for anybody who's following the tutorial, I want to do it so everybody can follow. So I'm just going to open up a new Google Chrome tab, and we're going to go to Google and type in Postman. We're going to click it. All you got to do is create a free account. It's free, no credit card required. This allows you to test different endpoints that you create. So what you can do is you can go up here to the top left. Your screen will look something similar to this. Let me just zoom in so you can see better. You're going to go to workspaces, and you're going to click create workspace, right? You're going to create a blank workspace, and then you can name this whatever. So we can say MERN Auth tutorial, which I might already have a name with this. And it's going to create the workspace right here. Next, you're going to want to click this icon and click the plus icon here and click blank collection. So what we could do is we could just name it authentication testing, whatever you want to name it. And then here, when you hover over it, when it's populates here at the left, click these three dots and click add request. So this is where we could create a new request, okay? So this is going to be our sign up request, and it is going to be a post request, and it's going to be http://localhost 3000/API/auth/sign up. Okay, let's go to our code real quick and make sure our routes have, instead of .get, make sure it's .post for the sign up, .post for the login, and .post for the logout. So make sure that is correct. Let's go back to our Postman. And then also to make sure your server is running. So open the terminal and let's just make sure everything is correct. So right now we have an error regarding the max age, and it's probably because I didn't put a comma. So let's go inside of our generate JWT token, and there's no comma after strict. So let's put a comma, and everything looks to be working. So all you have to do is read the console of the errors and see what you have to fix and debug it from there. And if you guys do have any questions, you can leave comments down below and I'll answer them as soon as I can. So we are going to test this specific endpoint, make sure your server is running. We need to send some data to this endpoint. So we're going to click body here, click raw, and then we're going to go to JSON, open up an object. We have to give the name, right? So the name will be Brett. We're also going to do an email. The email is going to be, say, brett1@gmail.com. And then we're going to do a password. And this password is going to be a string of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I also want to open up MongoDB. So let me pull that over. And what we're going to do is make sure your database is, there's nothing in it. There should be nothing in it. And it should look something similar to this. And we are going to test it to see if we get it. And the response will be right here. So we're going to send this response and see, and if anything's wrong, we'll debug it from there. So the response we got back was a 201 created. We have a success of true, message of user created successfully, and then we're passing back all of the user data that is inside of the underscore doc. So as you can see here, as an underscore ID that I created, And then we have the verification token expires at is verified email and name. We also have cookies. We have OneSS, and this is the cookie we created with that JWT token. And as you can see here, secure false because it's in not in production, and HTTP only, which is true. And it expires in 7 days from now, which is the 28th, and will be December 5th. Okay, so it looks like everything is working. Let's refresh our database, make sure the user's in here. And as you can see, the user's in here with the hashed password. That is what a hashed password will look like. The password is supposed to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but the password shows up in the database like this. And if a hacker hacks, they won't be able to use this person's account. So let's go back, and that is how we create the sign up handler function and test it out as well. Next, we are going to create the verification token process of actually sending it to their email so they could confirm their email address. Next, we want to be able to send the email of the verification token to our user so they can verify the email, and we can allow them to sign into their account after they have registered. We also want to make sure the email is a legit email and they have access to it as well. So we're going to use resend to do this. And if we go into Google Chrome, all you have to do is type in resend.com, sign up for an account or log in if you have one. And I'm going to go over the packages that they have. They do have a free tier, which is very generous. And the free tier allows you to send 3,000 emails a month, and it allows you to verify one domain. If you don't have a domain, that's totally fine because we're going to use the domain and email that Resend gives us when it comes to testing purposes. And then if you do want to upgrade, it is $20 a month. You can send 50,000 emails a month and verify up to 10 domains. So these are the different pricing structures of Resend. I am not affiliated with them at all. So this is just who I use for my actual personal projects I create. So the first thing you want to do is we want to get the API key since we're here. Let's go over to this API key section here. You're going to click create API key. You can name it anything you want. So we could just name this auth MERN tutorial. We want to give it full access. And then if you have a specific domain you want to have it associated with, you click it here. But if not, click all domains. Make sure you save this somewhere. So we're going to save this in our env variable or file. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go to our .env, and we are going to save this under resend underscore API underscore key equals, and then paste it in. Obviously, don't let anybody have this API key because then they could just start sending emails through your account and start wasting your credits essentially. Don't worry, I'm going to delete this API key before this video is even started. So don't try to use this because it's not going to work. Get your own API key through Resend. It's free. So let's go back. That's in our env file. Next thing I want to do is I want to show you the quick start guide. So all you had to do was go over to the docs here at the top right, click it, and then there's a quick start guide. We are going to go to Express, right? Because we are using Express. And make sure you have the package installed, which we did at the very beginning. It's npm install resend. And then we are initially going to send it with HTML. So we're going to send the email using HTML. We aren't going to copy this verbatim because as you see, they create a port here through Express. They're calling a random endpoint, which is the homepage endpoint, and they're initializing Resend and the Express app all in the same file. So this isn't worth us copying, so we're going to create it ourselves. But we could use it as a guide. So what we're going to do is inside the backend, we're going to create another folder called Resend. And then inside of Resend, we could create a file called config.js. What we're going to do here is we're going to import Resend, and this is going to come from Resend. So let me just make sure this import syntax is right. So as you can see, import Resend with the curly brackets from Resend like that. Next, let's initialize it. So we're going to export const resend equals new resend. And then inside of this, we're going to have the process.env.resend underscore API underscore key, just like that. Another thing we have to do is we have to import the .env from .env and then call the config of that as well, the function. So we're able to read this. And then also too, when you change anything in your env file, a good practice is to always stop your server and just restart it. So that's what I'm doing here. And I'm going to close the terminal port as well. So it looks like we have no errors. We're creating our initial configuration file here for resend. Next, I'm going to create a new file called email.js. And if you have a lot of emails that you're going to send, maybe you want to separate the files, but we're just going to create one file. And what we're going to send for now is the verification email. So we're going to call this export const send verification email. It's going to be an asynchronous function, and this is going to accept inside of the props the email and also the verification token. And let's just create an arrow function with the code. So initially we could just run a try catch. And what we're going to do is let's at the top import resend from our config file like this. And what we can do in here is if we go back to the documentation, we could say await resend.emails.send, and then we could just copy this whole thing here. And it either is going to return the data or it's going to return an error like that. So I'm just going to paste this here. And we have to send it. So when I was talking about the email they give us for testing purposes, resend, the email is going to be this onboarding@resend.dev. So you have to use this. And another very key thing is if you are on a free account and you're not using a verified domain, so you're using this email, you can only test emails by sending to the email you signed up with resend. So the email I signed up with resend is this. So if you're using this email, make sure you're using the email that you signed up with resend to. So I'm just going to hard code this for now, and it does have an array. So like it could be to multiple email accounts, but for now we're just sending it to me, and it's going to be from this account. And the subject is going to be verify your email address now. And this is HTML, right? So what we can do here is we could do backticks, and then we can say verify your email address with this token. And then as you can see, we pass in the verification token we're receiving from the parameter or the props. So now we have to actually call this function, right? And before we do that, let's actually just do the catch real quick. Let's just console.log. We could console.log error sending verification email. And let's just console the error. And then also let's throw a new error saying error sending verification email. And that should be fine. That should be good enough because we could just look at the console to see what the actual error is. So now this is the try catch that we have inside of the send verification email function. Now let's call this. And where should we call this? Well, we should call this when they actually sign up for an account, which is the route handler we just created, right? So what we want to do is right underneath the generating of the JWT token, we want to send the verification email, right? So we are going to click await, send verification email, make sure it's auto import at the top or imported manually. So this already imported at the top. And what we have to do is we have to pass in two parameters, right? Because that's what we're accepting. We're accepting the email, what's going to be actually user.email. And it's also going to be the verification token. And the verification token is what we created right here, and we're storing it in this variable. So the user.email is going to be the email that we are sending this verification token to. So for us right now, we can replace this with email like this, as long as I am typing the email that's coming, that is associated with my resend account. So we have the email and then we have the verification token, and we are passing it in through this right here. So what it should do is then it'll call this function. It will send the email with the subject of this and the verify your email address with this specific verification token. Okay, so let's test it out to see if everything works. Make sure we look in the server and see if we have any errors, which we do. So it's saying it can't find the module resend config. So at the top, you see there's no .js. It's a very common error that everybody gets. Just add that, and it looks like if we press Control S, everything looks good to go. So let's test this out. So what we're going to do is go back to Postman. Let's reload. Let's just type in the route we are going to call. So it's going to be localhost 3000 / API / auth / sign up. And then also too, let's look at our MongoDB database. Let's just sign in real quick if you're not signed in. And we're going to check our database, remove the user just so we can have a clean slate, right? So right now I currently do have a user. Let's just delete it. So we have no users in our database. Let's run this specific endpoint and call it. Let's add a body with raw JSON. Like I said, we are going to have the name, which is Brett, the email, which is the one with your resend account, which is this. And then we're going to have whatever password we want. Okay, so let's click send and see what we get. So we do get a 201. The user was created. Everything looks good. Obviously, we knew this worked. But let's see if we get any errors in our terminal. So right now we have no errors in our terminal. So what I want to do now is check to see if we actually are getting an email with the verification token. So verify your email address. We received it just recently. And as you can see here, verify your email address with this token, and it's 243636. So what we can do to confirm is look in our database, and it's 243636. So the verification token matches, and we were able to successfully send it via email. Okay, now let's try to customize the email and make it look a lot better for the user on their end. Instead of just a single line of text that looks like this with their verification token, there's a lot of ways you could do this, but for us in this video, we are going to use React Email. And there's a few ways you could use React Email. So open up a Google tab, a new Google tab, and type in React Email in the search bar. And it should be the first one. And let's just go to templates. So they already have a bunch of pre-built templates that you could just copy and paste. So for our case right now, we are doing a verify email, which they have one here at the very first one. We're going to click that. And as you can see, it's just giving you a preview of how the email will look, which is a lot better than the one we have now. So we are going to go here at the top right, click this code button, and it's going to show us the code in React, HTML, and then just plain text. So we're going to go over to HTML, and then we're going to copy this. So now we have it copied in our clipboard. Let's go back to our code, and let's create a file inside of our resend folder called email-templates.js, just like that. And let's create a variable called verification token email template. And what this is going to equal, it's going to equal HTML. So what we can do here is we could do template literals and then just paste it all in here like this. And I'm going to press Control S to style it better. And then Alt-Z to wrap the text so it could be fitted on the screen. So now this is all of the HTML text that we have here, correct? And what we want to do is we want to replace the verification token that they have in here, which is hard-coded, with the one that we get from the verification token. So first, let's use this variable that we created and we're exporting it. So let's get this right here. We're going to copy this. Let's go into the email.js. Let's remove this right here. And what we're going to have to do is we are going to paste it here. And let's import it at the top. So this is coming from the inside the directory of email-templates.js. And then what we can do here is if we go back to how it looks, the preview of the email, you see it has this hard-coded. So let's copy this real quick. We could go back to our code, go into the template, press Control F, and then paste that there. And then we're going to try to find it. So you can see right here, it's in between a P tag. So we are going to replace this. So let's just go like this. And let's just replace it with verification token like that. So it's going to look something like this. And then we're going to copy this with the curly braces. Press Control C. Let's go back here and we're going to do a dot replace. And then it's going to be exactly like that. We're going to get the string of verification token with the brackets and we're going to replace it with the verification token that we are getting from the props. And then we have to remember where we're calling this function is inside of the sign up route handler. So as you can see here, we send the verification email, we send the user's email, and then we send the verification token that we created up here. Okay, so now the email should look a lot better since we're using that template. So let's test it out. Let's go and let's clear our database. So make sure you open your MongoDB. Let's delete the user in here. Go back to Postman. Make sure you're on the correct route with the post request, and also make sure your server is running. So our server is running on port 3000. So let's make sure we have localhost 3000 /API auth sign up. We're sending Brett, DA Brett Westwood, and this we're going to click send. And that is true, and it became a 201 status, and the user was created successfully. So now if we check the email, right? We do have an email. And as you can see, it says verify your email address. Obviously, we didn't change anything else. You'd put your own logo, everything here. And let's make sure that this verification code matches with the one in our database. So to do that, let's refresh the database. And we have 784354. 784354. So that is how you create a custom email with React Email using the HTML. Obviously, a lot of people use React Email and they use it when they're using React, but right now we're using Express and Node.js, so we can't use React. We have to use the HTML for the specific backend part. So we did send the verification token. Now it is on our end that we need to verify the email and change the property of the user from is verified from false to true. And when it's true, that means we're going to allow them to log in. So we are going to create another endpoint. So let's go over to our routes, and I'm going to click Shift Alt and down, and it's just going to copy the line I was on. And we're going to create a route called an endpoint called verify email. So this is the endpoint right here. And then let's create the function associated when this endpoint is called. We could call this verify email. Let's import it here at the top because it's going to come from the same controllers file. And what we're going to do here is we're going to say export const verify email. It's going to be asynchronous, and it's going to take in the request and response. So now we're going to work on the verify email function, and we have to think what we're going to accept. So what we have to take in is we are going to take in the verification token or the code, right? So the 6-digit code that we send back from that email. And and that is going to come from the request.body. And now we could do a try catch. And in the try catch, first thing we need to do is we need to see if there is a user that has this specific token associated with their account. So to do that, we're going to do const user equals await user dot find one. And what we can do here is we could do the verification token is going to be equal to the code. And the verification token expires has to be greater than the date now because it does have an expiration. So if we look real quick, let's look. Let's refresh our database. We do have a verification token, right? Then we have a verification token expires at. So we want to make sure that it hasn't expired yet. And then we also want to make sure that the verification token that we are receiving from this endpoint matches with the user, because each verification token is going to be unique and we are going to be able to match it up based off the verification token. So let's go back to our code. And what we could do here now is we could do a check. So we're going to say if there is no user or the user is falsy, it's a falsy value. Let's just return a response.json of 400 with success of false, and the message will be invalid or expired verification code, because that's what is happening. And then what we're going to do here is we are going to change the user.isVerified to true. So we want to switch that field. And then we also want to remove the user.verification token undefined, and the user.verification token expires at equals undefined. So this is going to remove those two properties from the database because we don't need it anymore. And then what we have to do is we have to wait, and then we have to save the user in the database to get these to update. And then next, after we do this, we want to send another email. If you want to, you could send a welcome email, which we can do right here. So we could do await send welcome email. And then what we could pass in to our welcome email to make it more custom to the user, we could do the user.email. And then we also could do the user.name. So we could address them by their name, not just pi. It'll actually be very custom to them specifically. And right now we don't have a send welcome email. So we're going to copy this, go into our email, and let's create another function. So export const, and then paste that in we just got. It'll be asynchronous. And what we're going to accept in here is the email and the name, right? And what we can do here is we could do a try catch. And inside the try catch, we could copy a lot of this code right here, because that is how you send it with the SDK of resend. So either we get data back or an error, resend.emails, we're using the same email. We're sending it to the email that we were receiving from the props. We could change the subject to welcome to our company, or whatever your company name is. And now we could look for a different email template. So let's go back to our Google Chrome. And you can look here at the left side. So you see there's a welcome category. I don't know if you can see it. I can zoom in more. A welcome category right here. And then you can see all the welcome emails. We could just do something very simple like this, koala. So you're going to click the code here at the top right, HTML, copy the HTML, come back to the code, and inside of the email templates, right below this one, let's just export const welcome underscore email underscore template equals template literals. Let's paste what we just copied, right? And let's go back to the Google Chrome real quick, and let's look at the preview again. So it says, hi, Alan. So instead of Alan, let's use their name, right? So we could do a control F, find Alan. Here's Alan right here. So what we could do here is we could just do name like this with curly braces. And we really don't have to use email, so I'm not going to pass email through inside of the template, but we do need it to send the actual email to that specific email address. So all we're going to do is the name. So if we go back to the emails, we can remove the verification token, right? Email that we were sending. And what we're going to do here is we are going to have the welcome email template, and then we're going to replace the name with the name we're receiving from the props. Okay, so that should work. And the reason why we're sending the welcome email is because that means they verified their email and they now can use our service by logging in. So let's go back to our controller function and make sure we have everything completed. So after we send the welcome email, let's just return a response. So res.status of 200 with success of true and the message email verified successfully. And let's just do a catch in the console. Let's do a console.log error verifying email. Let's send a status back of 400 with the error message. Okay. So this is the verify email route handler when we call that specific endpoint. So let's test it out. So we are going to go to our database and we have the verification. Let's refresh just to make sure everything's good. We have the verification token of 784354. Let's just copy this and let's go to Postman and let's create a route. So we're going to create a verify email route. That's why I named it. And it's going to be from HTTP localhost 3000 /API/auth/ verify email. And what we're going to pass in the body as JSON is the code, right? Because that's what it's accepting. So let's, for example, just put a 5 here instead of a 4. So it's going to be the wrong code. Let's send it. And success, false, invalid, or expired verification code. So 400 bad requests. So let's put this back to a 4, the last number. Let's click send. Send welcome is not defined. So that means we didn't import it. So let's go back real quick. And the send welcome, let's import this at the top. Make sure it's imported. There we go. Let's go back, open up our database, refresh the page just to make sure it actually didn't go through. And it did. So is verified as true. It just didn't send the welcome email. So let me delete this. And let's start from the beginning by signing up. So we're going to sign up. And we're doing localhost 5000, not, it should be 3000. So let's send. So a 201, a user was created. So now what we can do is we could take this verification token here. We're going to copy it. We're going to go to verify email. Let's paste this new code in because it's a totally new user. And let's click send. So we got true, email verified successfully with the 200 OK. So now I should have gotten 2 emails, one for the verify your email, and then one is a welcome email. So let's refresh. So verify your email address now. There's that token we just put in. And if we look at the other, welcome to our company, and there is the email template with my name being dynamically rendered. So that is how we are going to create the endpoint for verifying emails on our end. So we can now allow them to log in and use our service. So after the user verifies their email, now it's time for them to actually log into their account, which will allow them only if the email is verified. So we are inside of our auth controllers, and let's work on the login route handler. So this is going to be the function we work on. So let's remove the res.send, and what we're going to get from the body, and we're going to require them to log in, is their email and password. So we're going to say const, and we're going to destructure the email and password from the request.body. And then we're going to do a try catch. And inside the try, first we want to see if this user even exists. So we're going to do user.find1. and then we are going to pass in the email like that. And so we're going to say if there is no user or if it's a falsy value, we are going to return a status of 400 and a message saying invalid credentials and a success of false. Next, we are going to check to see if the password they typed in matches the password in the database associated with the user. So we're going to say const is password valid and then equals await. And we're going to use a method that bcrypt gives us because if you remember, the password in the database is hashed. So the only way you could compare the password that they typed to the hash password is by using the compare method that bcrypt gives us. So it's going to be bcrypt.compare, and it's going to be the password they typed, and then the password that the database has, which is inside of the user variable. So it's user.password. And we're going to say if this is a falsy value, that means if the password is invalid, they didn't type in the correct one, we're going to send a message back saying invalid credentials as well, with a success of false and a status of 400. Okay, next we want to see if the user actually verified their email address. So what we can do here is const is verified equals to the user dot is verified. So let's just make sure this is the correct terminology. So we're using is verified right here. And if we check our database, and if we zoom in a little bit, you can see is verified is true. So let's go back to our code, and const is verified is going to equal the user dot is verified. So that's going to be true, this variable. And if it's not true, if it's falsy, we need to return a 400 status with a success of false saying email not verified. So those are the three main checks that we want to do before allowing the user to log in. Now, after they run through those three checks, what we want to do is we want to generate the JWT token, because after they log out, we are going to clear the cookie or the token. And then when they log in, we're going to create the token. So what we're going to take into the function is the response and the user._ID. And this is going to go inside the payload, and we need the response to set the cookie. Okay. And then after that, all we have to do is do a res.status 200, and it'll be .json. And what we can do here is we say success is true with a message of login successfully, just like that. So other than that, that should be it for the login route handler. And let's just finish the catch. So let's run a console.log error logging in with the error. And let's return a status of 400 with a success of false and the message equaling the error.message. So right here is the whole route handler function. And this is going to be called this function when we hit this specific endpoint of the API /auth/login. And then we're calling in this login function. So let's test this out to make sure everything is working and try different scenarios for the test as well. So to do this, we can go to the login, and we're going to send it to the endpoint localhost 3000 /API auth login. We are sending back in the body the email and the password. Let's try it with a password that is wrong. So it'll be 12345. Let's click send. And as you can see, we get a success of false and message invalid credentials. What we could do after this is we could do the correct password, click send, and we're still getting invalid credentials. So let's make sure the emails, oh, because I have a 6, I don't have a 5 there too. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's try this again. So it's going to be success of true and login successful with the 200 status. So that means our login function is working when we hit the specific endpoint. Okay, now let's work on the logout route handler and the functionality for that when that endpoint is called. So right now, all we're doing is sending the string of logout route, and this is going to be a quick handler. All we have to do is clear the cookie. So what we're doing is we're saving the JWT token inside of the response cookie. And we want to clear this because the way we're going to check to see if they're authenticated or not, which means if they're logged in or not, is we are going to check to see if there's a cookie that exists. And if that cookie exists, we need to make sure it matches up with that user ID and make sure we have a user in the database. So all we have to do for the logout function is let's just make this function asynchronous. And also let's do a res.clear cookie. And then we have to pass in the name of the cookie we called. So we called it token. So we're going to pass in token like that. And I want to show you where we named this. So if we look at the utils folder, the generate JWT token, we created the cookie right here. We called it a token, and then we used the variable token up here where we created it with the jsonwebtoken package. And then we obviously added a few options within the cookie as well. So this is why we named it token. So if you name it something else, so say if you named it something else here, it would be that name as well. So other than that, we're going to return a status of 200 with a success of true and the message logged out successfully. So that's just going to clear the cookie from the user and allow us to log out. So let's test that out. So right now we have one cookie, as you can see. Let's go to the logout endpoint and let's do localhost 3000 /API/auth/logout, and there's going to be no data sent to in the request. So let's just click send, and as you can see, success true, message of logged out successfully, and we have no cookies received from the server, but there is also no cookies that we have available within our specific endpoint as well because we cleared the cookie. Okay, so now the user can actually register for an account. Then they'll get an email sent to that email to verify their account. They can also log in and log out. Now the next thing we want to do is, just in case the user forgets the password that they used to sign up, we want to give them an option to create a new password so they can still use their account. And to do this, the first step we're going to do is we're going to go inside of our routes folder and we're going to create a new endpoint. So I'm going to press Shift Alt down and we are going to call this endpoint forgot-password. And that's the endpoint. And then when the endpoint is called, we are going to run the function forgot password like this. Let's get it from the top. So we're just working backwards here. So now we got to create this function inside of the controllers, right? So we're going to go inside of our auth controllers. Here's our 4 functions we have now: the sign up, login, log out, and verify email. Next, we want to create the export const forgot password. It's going to be an asynchronous function taking in the request and response. And now we can actually work on the logic for the forgot password. So when a user forgets their password, they have to provide their email address to us so we can send them an email so they can reset the password. So inside of the request body, we are going to get the email and we are destructuring it from the request.body. Next, let's do the try catch. And inside of the try, let's get the user from our database. So we're going to say user await, and we're going to say user.find1, the find1 method. And we are going to see if there is a user associated with the email they provided us. So we're going to do a check if there is no user or it's a false value. We're going to return a status of 400 of a message of user not found. So that means there's no user found with the email they provided. Next, we are going to now, since we know there is an email associated with a user in our database, we need to send a reset token, right? So we need to create a reset token first. So there's a few ways you could do this, and you could do it the same way we did with the generate JWT, but we could do this all in one line of code. So we're going to do it right here. So we're going to do const reset token, or let's call this reset password token, right? Because I like naming it the same that we named it inside of our schema. So we named it reset password token, and reset password expires at. So this is going to be the reset password token, and we are going to use a new package, and this is called crypto. So we're going to open up our terminal. Of course, we have an error because we're still typing. Let's open up a new terminal, and you're going to run npm I crypto. and then you're going to press enter, and it's going to install the crypto package. We could close this terminal. Let's check our package.json, and I have version 1.0.1. So what we can do with this is we could create a random value with the random bytes method, and we're going to pass in the value 32 and pretty much change this value to a string in the form of a hex. So this is going to create a huge string of random values, which is going to act as our password reset token. Then we want to actually give an expiration, right? We don't want it to always last. So we're going to say const reset password token expires at, and what we want this password reset token expire is 1 hour after they request it. So when you do usually verification, it's usually 24 hours. So when they had to verify their account, but when it comes to resetting their password, they only get 1 hour to reset it. And let's just make sure that this matches with our model. So reset password expires at, reset password expires at, and then let's reset password token. Okay, cool. So now all this matches up. And what we want to do is now we want to add this to the user and the database, these two specific variables. So to do that, we're going to do user.reset password token. It's going to equal the variable reset password token, and user reset password expires at is going to equal this specific variable here. And then after we do that, let's save it now in the database. So you await user.save. So now this is going to update the database with these two property fields right here. And then what we have to do is now we have to send the password reset email. So we're going to do await and then send password reset email. We have to create this function, and where we've been creating these functions is inside of the email.js whenever we send an email. And let's call it here, and then let's inside of the function, let's pass in the user.email, and let's also pass in the reset URL link. So this is the link that is going, this is the link they're going to click, and this is going to allow them to reset their password, right? So to do that, we can do template literal. Let's do the $, and let's do the process.env.client_URL. And the reason why this client URL is going to be different is because we're going to be using Vite, and this is going to be for our front end. So it's going to have a different local host, and we're going to do reset-password and then /, and then this is where we're going to add the token, right? So let's just wrap this. It's going to be the reset password token. So this is how the URL of the reset URL is going to look. It's going to look exactly like this. And now we have to add this client URL to our .env. So client URL is going to equal HTTP localhost 5173. So it's 5173 / reset password, and then the reset password token. So now let's create this function inside of our email.js. So let's do an export const. And this is going to be an asynchronous function, and it is going to accept in the props the email and the reset token, right? Not the reset token. We're going to call this the reset URL. And what we could do here is we could open up one of our recent functions where we send emails. Let's just copy all of it. It's almost very similar, and paste it. Then we could close this back up. And we are going to send emails from this email when we're testing. We're going to send it to the email that they provide us to reset the password. The subject could be called reset your password. And let's create a new template for resetting a password. Or if you want to, we could just do this. So click blank here to reset your password. So you could do a template from React emails like we've been doing, or you could just do a simple string. For this case, I'm going to do a simple string. And as you can see, it's an HTML A tag, or it says click here. And when you click it, it's going to be the reset URL to reset your password. Okay, so let's go back to the controller. Let's import this, right? We're going to import this function at the top. And what we're going to do after we send the email, that means we're going to send a status back of 200, right? Saying the password reset email sent, and then we'll do successfully. And then for the catch, do a console.log error sending the password reset email. And let's send a status of 400 back with the error.message. Okay. So let's close the terminal. And this is the whole handler function when it comes to forgetting your password. So it looks like everything in here looks correct. Now let's just test it. Let's open up the terminal. We have no errors. So what we can do is we go to Postman and test this out. So first, let's go to our database, refresh the page. And we do have a user with the email of my email. So let's go, and you're going to create a new request. Name it whatever you want, associated with forgetting your password. The endpoint's going to be localhost 3000, API, auth, and forgot password. And we're going to send back raw JSON data, and we're going to send an email, and it's going to be my email or whatever email is associated with the database. So let's, for example, let's say if we mistyped the email, let's click send, false, user not found. So that's going to be the first check that fails. But now let's say if there is an actual email, so we're going to click send. It's going to say true, password reset email sent successfully. So let's look and see what we got. So as you can see, we get this string, click here to reset your password. So let's click. And as you can see, it opens up localhost 5173, reset password with this huge token at the end. This is the token that we have to match when we are going to reset their password to make sure that is the correct person and it's the person that actually has access to the email. So let's check the database to see if that's the correct token. So we have C6F9. So let's refresh our database and see if that token's in there. So we have C6F9, and then we have the expires at. So everything looks like it matches up. Now we just have to create the endpoint to actually reset the password. To actually reset the password, we are going to pass the token inside as a parameter of the endpoint. So to do that, let's go over to our routes. And I'm just going to press Shift Alt down, make a copy. And what we're going to do here is we are going to create an endpoint called reset password and then dash, and then you're going to have a semicolon and then token. This means it is going to come as a param from the request. And we just named it token. I mean, you can name this whatever you want, but token makes sense for our use case. So now that we have this specific endpoint, let's create a function for it. So we're going to say reset password. Let's import it here at the top. Might as well since we're on the page. And let's go into our controller and now create the route handler, the function for this specific endpoint when it's called. So let's close the one we just created, which is the forgot password. So now we have these 5 functions. Next one is going to be export const. Reset password is going to be asynchronous. And what we're going to do is first we just do a try catch. And inside of the try, we are going to get the params from the request. So to do that, all we have to do is use the destructure method, so token, and it's coming from the request.params. Next is when we call this endpoint, the user is actually going to reset their password. So when they reset the password, we're going to get it from the request body because it's going to be an input, right? And it's going to just get sent back as JSON data to our endpoint. So this is the password, and then we get the token from the params. And that is coming from the URL params. So request.params like that. Next is let's see if there is a user that is going to be associated with the reset password token, right? So to do that, to match it up to make sure the correct user is changing the password, we're going to use the user.findOne method. And we are going to find the user that the reset password token matches the actual token, right? So let's make sure that this is the correct as this. So yes, it is. And then let's also make sure that the reset password expires at is actually not expired, which is an hour from the time. So we're going to say greater than the date now, which is the current time when this endpoint is called. So if this fails, that means we get a falsy value, right? So we're going to say if there's no user, we are going to return a status of 400 saying invalid or expired reset token. So that is the first major check we're doing, and we are getting the values from the params and the body from the request. Next is we need to now hash the password that they gave us back into the database. So we need to do hashed password, right? Equals await bcrypt .hash, and we're going to do the password with the salt value of 10. So now that the password's hashed and stored in that variable, we're going to do user.password equals hashed password. And now that we don't need the reset password token or the expires at, let's make these undefined. So reset.userPassword undefined, and the password expires at undefined as well. Now let's save these in the database by user.save. And then let's also send another email. So this email is going to say that the password reset was successful, and now they could use their new password they created to log in. So we're going to say await send reset success email, and all we have to do is pass in the user.email because we need to know who we're going to send it to. So we need the email inside of this function. So let's create this function inside of the email.js. And what we can do is to just do export const, the name, it's going to be asynchronous. Let's copy what we did up here before, paste it in, and say in the subject line, password reset was successful. And what we can do here is we could just do a simple string, your password was reset successfully, or you can get a template or create your own with HTML. So we're just going to do the string for now, saying that, and password reset was successful. And we're going to say error sending password reset successful email. And then this one, let's fix this error console here too. Error sending password reset email. Okay. So now that we have that, let's go back to our controller. Let's import this function at the top. So make sure this is imported. We have 4 emails imported at the top here. And after we send the email successful, that means we just have to send a 200 status back saying the password reset was successful. And let's complete our catch with a console log and a status of 400 with the error message. Okay, so that is the reset password raw handler function that is going to be called when this endpoint is hit, and it has this token that is going to be a dynamic value at the end of it, which is why we have this syntax here with the semicolon. So let's try this out and see if it works. So what we can do is we could go to the local host of, and then at the end, you could copy the token here, or you could just copy it in the database. So let's just copy it in the database to make sure. Let's refresh. And we still have the token here. So let's copy it. So we're going to copy the whole reset password token. And let's go to Postman, and let's create another route, a request. And this request is going to be localhost 3000 /API/auth /reset password, and then the token. So as you can see, I passed the token right there like that. And then the only thing we are going to send in the request body is going to be the new password, right? Because that is what we're receiving. So if we check this specific endpoint, we are receiving the password that the newly created password that they did, which is right here, the request.body. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So let's try sending it and see if it works. So we got status of 200, success true, and password reset successfully. So let's see if we got an email, right? So if we got an email, that means it most likely worked and password reset was successful and your password was reset successfully, as you can see here, right? And let's try logging in now with the newly updated password. So now that the password is reset, the password should have saved in the database, and let's test that out as well now. So let's make sure we log out. So we're going to log out to make sure you're at localhost 3000. So we logged out, and now let's log in. And when we log in, let's try the old password. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? We're going to click send and false invalid credentials. Okay, that's a good sign. But let's test now with the right password. So we're going to click send and true login successful. And it also created the cookie. And we have some headers here as well, including the cookie that we call token. So now the reset password is successful. And the next thing we need to do is we need to make sure we authenticate when the user is logged in or not. So this is going to be to help protect certain routes and pages so that only a logged in user can actually access these specific pages. To check to see if the user is authenticated, let's create a new endpoint. So to create the new endpoint, this is going to be different. It's going to be router.get request. And we are going to introduce a new concept called middleware. And for that, let's first create the endpoint. So this is going to be /check -auth, and then let's add the middleware. So we're going to call this function verified token, and this function is going to be called before the actual route handler function that we've been using for the past endpoints that we've been doing in the video. So for example, we're going to have a check auth function, but before this check auth function runs, we're going to have a verified token, and this is going to run. And this is going to be considered the middleware. So first, let's just add the check auth into the controllers import because that's where we're going to create that function. But let's create a backend folder called middleware inside of the backend. And then inside there, let's call the file verify token.js. And let's quickly create and set up the functions so we could keep continuing on with actually creating the main function. But this middleware function is very important, and we're going to introduce a new word that is very specific to middleware. So we're going to import JWT from jsonwebtoken. Let's create the function called verify token, and we're exporting as well. And what this is going to take in, it's going to take in the request, the response, and the next. So this is the new keyword when it comes, this is the keyword when it comes to middleware. And what this does is when you call next like this, that means it's going to run the next function. So wherever you call it. So for example, the next function will be the check auth right here, right? So let's import the verified token here at the top, since we just created it, and we do have this next, and we'll call that check auth function when we call it. So first, let's create this middleware. So this middleware is going to verify the token and make sure they actually have a legit JWT token so they can be on the specific page that is required by your application. So say const token equals, and we're going to get this from the request.cookies.token. So that is, oops, I didn't mean to do that. That's Copilot trying to finish the code for me. So we're going to get the token from the request.cookies.token. And to get anything from the cookies, we have to add a middleware to our index.js file. And to do this, we are going to import. So let's just do an import. We're going to call a cookie parser. And this is coming from the cookie parser package. So this allows us to read data inside of cookies. That's what it's pretty much doing. So we're going to do app.use. And this is going to be the cookie parser, and we're calling it inside of there. And like I said, this is for parsing cookies or reading data that's coming from the cookies. If you don't do this, you're not going to be able to get this token, and it's going to be undefined. So let's go back and finish this. So we're going to say if there is no token, we can't find any tokens in the cookies. Let's just return a status of 401 saying unauthorized. But other than that, let's run the try catch. And inside of the try, let's decode the JWT, because right now it's encoded. We have to decode it. And what we can do here is we could decode the JWT with the verify method. And what we need to do here is we need to pass in the token and the secret, which is in our env file. So that variable right there. And then we're going to say if it wasn't decoded, that's what it pretty much means. If it wasn't decoded, we're going to return a 401 saying unauthorized. Okay, so that means it's decoded now. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do the request.user_id equals the decoded it'll be user ID. And I am going to console log this so you guys could see how I'm getting this user ID. But one way you can know without even console logging it is because you're going to have a property after you decode it with the payload. And the payload that we passed through the back, if you look here, is the user ID. So when we signed the token, we passed the payload of user ID into that token. Now that we're decoding the token, we could get the user ID out of it and store it inside of the request.userid like this. And then after that is done, what we can do is we could call the next function by using this specific syntax. Now let's finish the catch. Let's just console.log an error. And then let's just return a status of 401 saying unauthorized. Okay, so that is the middleware function, right? So now let's go back to the auth route and let's do the check auth. Let's create this function inside of our auth controller. So what we're going to do here is we're going to scroll to the bottom. Let's do an export const check auth. It is going to be a function like that. And this is going to be a simple function compared to the rest. We're going to have a try catch. We are going to get the user. So to do that, we're just going to do const user equals await user.find by ID. And we're getting the request.user_id. So we've been doing a find user by email, but we're not passing in the email. We don't have access to the email. So to check the auth, we're doing the user ID. And you're probably wondering how we got the user ID from the request. But if you look at the verified token, so let's start from the beginning, actually from the endpoint. So the endpoint is going to be called, right? The check auth. It's going to be hit and it's going to run this verified token function. This verified token function gets the token from the cookie and then it decodes the cookie using the jsonwebtoken package verify method. And then we store it in the decoded variable. And then all we do is we set the request.userid to the decoded.userid, and then we run the next function. So now the request has a .userid value. And if we look here inside of our auth controller, we can use the request.userid to find the user and get all of the user information from the database here and store it inside the user variable. So hopefully that makes sense. And if it doesn't, just leave a comment down the video. Comment down below this video and I'll get to you as soon as I can and answer any questions related to this topic. So if there's no user, we're going to return a status of 400 saying user not found. And then if it passes that check, we're just going to say res.status, and then we're going to return the user. But let's make sure we don't return the actual password. So we could do user._doc. We spread through the syntax and let's just do the password as undefined like that. And let's just do a console.log the error here and then return a status as well. Okay, so now everything should work. So let's test it out inside of Postman. So inside of Postman, you're going to create a new request, and it's going to be a GET request to this specific endpoint, localhost 3000 API auth, check auth. And what we're going to do here is we're just going to click send. Make sure your server is running and you're also logged in. So as you can see, we have success, true, user, and then it gives us back all of the user information except for the password. So everything looks like it's working. Let's log out. So let's just click log out. Let's clear the cookie. So clear response. Let's click send. And as you can see, it's a false and it's saying unauthorized. It's because I cleared the cookie. So let me do this again to show you guys exactly what I mean. So let's log in. So we're logged in. We don't have any cookies right now inside of the check auth. So let's just refresh and try to log back in again. So let's do localhost 3000 API auth. We have a cookie now. Now for the check, we're not saying anything back. Let's do localhost 3000 and let's click send. And now we have a success of true and it has the cookie as well. So everything is working. Our backend is complete. Now let's actually work on the front end using Vite as our framework and React. So I am on the documentation for Vite, which is a front end framework on top of React. So to install this framework, all we have to do is run this command npm create Vite at latest. So we're going to copy this, head back over to our code, and we are going to close all of the files that are open. Let's just collapse all of the folders, and inside of the front end, this is where we're going to work on the front end. So let's open up our terminal, and in the terminal, we have to cd into the front end. And then that command we copied, let's paste it here and then press dot. So that means it's going to create the Vite app within the folder you're in. So we're just going to press enter. And it's going to ask you a few questions. We are using React and we're using JavaScript. And then now you have to run npm install. And this is going to install all the dependencies and packages required for Vite. This should take just about 10-15 seconds. And then after that, we could run the command npm run dev to start the server. And this is where I was saying this local server is run on port 5173. So we could open this. I'll drag it over here. And it should have a default home screen, as you can see here. I can just zoom in a little bit. This is the default Vite and React home screen. And if we look inside of our front end folder, you can see it created a bunch of files and folders inside of it. So if we go inside of the source and the app.jsx, and I'm just going to collapse the terminal real quick. This is the code you're seeing as the default homepage when you get a Vite app. So now that we have Vite successfully installed, next thing we need to do is I'm going to use Tailwind CSS for the CSS. So that means we have to initialize Tailwind into our project. So what we can do is we can go to Google Chrome and just type in Tailwind install. And we could do framework guides. And so now we're on the Tailwind CSS framework guides. I'll also leave a link in the description so you guys could just go do it quick if you want to. So you could do Next.js, Angular, Gatsby, Solid.js, but we're using Vite. So we're going to click this and we're just going to follow the steps. So step one is to run the command to create your Vite project, and then you're going to cd into it, which we've already done. Next, let's install Tailwind and initialize it as well. So we're going to press this copy button up here. We're going to go open up our terminal. Let's just stop the server for now. And let's paste it in, and make sure you're still in the front end directory. And we're going to press enter because all this is going to be done inside of your front end folder. So this is going to install Tailwind and also initialize it as well. So now that it's initialized, we have a Tailwind config file right here, .js. It also gave us a post.css.config.js file. and it just updated our package.json with the dependencies of Tailwind. As you can see, it's dev dependency, post CSS, and a few other things as well. So let's go to the next step of initializing it properly. We have to go inside the Tailwind config.js file and copy this content over. This is specifically for Vite. So if you're not using Vite and you're going off track, don't copy these steps step for step. Make sure you do the framework that you're associated with. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the Tailwind config file and we're going to replace the content with the content they provide here. Next is inside of your index.css, you should be copying this. So we're going to copy this and place it in there. So we are going to press Control-A to select all. We can remove all of the CSS and we could just paste the Tailwind right here. We could also delete the app.css. We're not going to use that. We're going to use Tailwind. And the assets is just a SVG, which we could delete as well. So now we have the app.jsx and we have ran all of these steps to initialize Tailwind. So now we can actually test it out. So let's just copy this H1 and see if it works. So what we are going to do, let's go back in. Let's remove everything inside the div, leave the fragment. Let's paste this H1. So it's going to be a text of 3XL, font bold, and underline. And if you aren't getting these helpful tooltips above it saying what it is, you can go to the extension tab here at the left in VS Code and type in Tailwind CSS. Oh, there it is. Tailwind CSS IntelliSense. And it will help you when you're coding Tailwind, especially if you're new to Tailwind. So I definitely recommend installing that extension on your VS Code. So now let's open up our development, our dev server. This is on 5173. Let's open it up, make sure we have no errors. And we do. Let's remove the state and let's remove everything here at the top. We don't need any of this. So now our page should be fine to go. Let's check it out. And as you can see, if I zoom in, we have an underline, which we specified in the CSS. We also have a bold and a text of 3XL. We can also do text red 500 just to confirm, because that's easy to see. And as you can see, the text turned red. So everything is working. We have successfully initialized our Vite app along with the Tailwind CSS. Next thing I do want to set up is the React Router DOM, which allows us to have a multi-page application. So Vite is a single page application, right? That's what it is. It's made for. And if you're used to using Next.js, which is very popular right now, they have their own built-in routing where it's just file and folder routing. So depending on the folder's name, that is going to be the route path, which is a lot easier and you don't have to install any external dependencies. But if you're using Vite, they don't have any routing, so we do have to install a package called React Router DOM. So inside, I'm going to open up a new terminal, and we're going to cd into the front end. And now that you're in the front end, we could run npm I React Router DOM. And it is very simple to set up. So after you do that, you could just check your package.json, confirm that you have it here. And I have version 7.0.1. And what we can do is inside of our main.jsx folder, we could wrap the app with the browser router. So it's going to be browser router. And this is almost like a provider. So our whole application is going to have access to routes with the React Router DOM. That's why we're wrapping it. And let's also import the browser router from React Router DOM like this. I'm going to press Control S to make sure the indentation is correct and styled right. And now that we have our whole application surrounded with that, we could go inside of the app.jsx. And this is considered our home page. And what we can do here is we could just define a few routes. So what I want to do is instead of a fragment, I'm just going to move this all. We're going to create a div. And inside we are going to have routes, right? So inside of the routes, there's going to be a route. So GitHub Copilot is pretty correct, right on with how it should be done. I'm just going to press accept, and I'm going to remove some of this, and we're going to do our own. And we must import this at the top as well. So we're going to import routes and route from React Router DOM. So the path is going to be the href in a sense, where when they click whatever the route is, what's the path they're going to. So this is going to be the home page, and the element that's going to render is going to be the home element, but we don't have a home element. This is going to be considered a home element. So all we have to do is we could do a string of home like that for the element. Next, let's just do Control-Shift down, create a few new routes. And the next route is going to be the sign up route. And then we also are going to have the login route. So those are going to be the first two that we're going to work with. And then what we're going to have here is we're going to have a sign up page. This is going to be a component. So it's a self-closing component like that. And then we have the login page as well. So what we can do now is we can actually create these pages and just make sure this is all working, okay? So if we go to the sign up page manually, it should work, and it should render the sign up page, which we don't have. So let's, inside of the source folder, let's create a new folder called pages. And inside of the pages, we could create a new file called the sign up page.tsx. And I'm going to run a snippet. It's called RAFCE. It's going to create a React arrow function. So if you don't have this, go to your extensions, just type in ES7, and it should be this one right here. It has 13.4 million downloads. It's ES7 plus React Redux React Native snippets. So do that extension, and then you can use this shortcut to easily create an arrow function. Okay, so after we create that, we have the sign up page. Let's create another file called the login page.jsx. I'm so used to doing TypeScript. It's going to be JSX. My fault, guys. So we're going to do JSX, and then for each, not TSX. TSX is TypeScript, which we're not going to do in this specific video. So we're doing login page, and then we have the login page as well. So let's go back to our app and let's import these. So I press Control and the space bar after, and I could start auto importing them like that. Or you can manually do it here at the top as well. So let's make sure our application is running on the development server. Let's open up localhost 5173. We can refresh, and let's go to the sign up page, and it should say sign up page. If we go to the login page, it should say login page. So that means our routes are working, and now our application is actually multi-page. So this is the basic setup of the React Router DOM for your front end. So we're going to initially start creating the sign up page UI and the CSS. And this video isn't really about how to style and do CSS. So we are going to use a tool called v0.dev. It is a very cool software that creates components for you and blocks with the power of AI. This is ran through by Vercel. That's the company that is running it. And they obviously partner up with Next.js. So it is a full stack framework, and they use Shadcn components. So all you have to do is type in a prompt here. So for example, we could type create a sign up page, and then you could be detailed as you want or not that detailed. And it's going to create the code. It's going to share the code source, and it's going to share the preview of how the code is going to look, and it'll give a description of what it did and the packages needed. So if we look at my history, about 2 hours ago, I said create a sign up page that requires the name, email, and password. I want an icon on the left side of the input. That's inside the input. I want to use some animations as well from Framer Motion. So when I typed that in, it generated this. So this is a sign up page where we could do name, email, and password. And as you can see, it gives a description of what it did and the packages needed that we need to install. And it also gives the code. So as you can see, this code is more tailored towards Next.js, but we will edit it and make it tailored towards our code as well. And as you can see, it also is doing it in TypeScript. So we are going to have to remove some things as well because it is for TypeScript. I think they do have an option to change it, but I don't know how. And obviously TypeScript is nowadays the default way to usually code stuff. So first thing is, let's install these dependencies because we are going to use this for the signup page. We go to our code, make sure you're in the front end folder, and we're going to install Framer Motion and Lucid React. Lucid React is a icon library, and Framer Motion allows us to animate our components. Next, let's copy over the code. So we're going to copy out the code, and let's paste it in the signup page. So let's go to the top. And as you can see, there's a use client directive. That's Next.js only, so we remove that. And what we have is we have motion from Framer Motion, useState, the icons from Lucid React, and then we have these 3 components. And as you see, we don't have this path. We don't have a components folder with the UI and input. This is coming from Shadcn. So what we can do is we can initialize Shadcn on our project and get these components as well. And as you can see here, it's using TypeScript as well. So it's trying to define the type for the event. So we're going to have to remove stuff like this React.form event because it is a JSX file, not TSX. Okay, so now let's go back to our Chrome and let's go to Shadcn. So you just type in Shadcn and then it should lead you to this. And in the docs, they have it for setting it up with Vite. So we've already created the Vite app. We've also have Tailwind already installed and set up correctly as they did here. And then some of this stuff you're not going to be able to follow because it is TypeScript dependent and we're using JSX. So there is a few things we are going to do and change based off of this Stack Overflow post. So right here, they're telling you if you're using JavaScript, it's saying we have to create a JSON config.json file. So let's just copy this. And we are going to create this here on the root of the front end folder. And then what it's telling us to do is also add this code in. So we're going to add this code. And it's also telling us we have to update the v.config.js file, which we do have, with this code here. So let's go over to our code base. We have a v.config.js. Let's paste that new one here. And now we could actually run the command. So if you go back over to the Shadcn docs of how to install it, we're skipping a bunch of these steps because we don't have this tsconfig file. Next, we are going to run the CLI. So we're going to run it with npm or whatever package manager you're using. We're going to paste it here and let's initialize Shadcn. So it looks like everything's working. All the checks passed. It's asking us which style would we like to use. We're just going to click New York, or you could use the arrow keys and switch to default. We're going to use neutral for base color, CSS variables, yes for theming. It's going to update the Tailwind config and updating the source.index.css. And installed all the dependencies, and it also created one file, and it's a libutils.js, and it's just allowing us to now create dynamic class names when it comes to this Tailwind CSS. So it allows us to create checks to say if something's checked, we can style it this way. If not, we can style it that way. This is what this file is allowing us to do, and it's inside of a lib folder that they created in the source. Now it says we may add components. So if we go back to our signup page, the components we want to add are the input, the button, and the label. So let's go over to Shadcn, and at the left-hand side of the screen, what we could do is we could just click on the button, and then it's npx Shadcn at latest add button. So it's all going to be in the same format. So let's just run this command. So we have the button, we have the input, and we have the label. So we have the button going. Let's do the input next. Here's the input. And then we have the label. I mean, this is very simple to set up code that's going to look really clean and nice that you could customize to your liking as well. So we're going to initialize these 3 components. And that means these paths are going to work because what it's doing is it creates a components folder, and if you already have a components folder created, it just does it within there. And it created a components folder, and inside the UI folder, and we have the button, the input, and the label. So as you could see, I'm going to close the terminal. It is literally giving us the source code for the button, the source code for the input, and the source code for the label. And we could edit whatever we want here. And it's getting this like BG destructive, text destructive, all of this, because we did update the index.css. And as you can see, it is getting like, where is it? Destructive right here with this specific color value. So it also updated your index.css. So we could use these specific things inside of your code and have it all in one area. So your whole styling of your website is consistent. You want the same green shade. So for example, if you're using green, you want the same green shade throughout the website. And it's easy to do it like this. So let's check to see if the signup page is actually rendering. And if it's not, we should fix any errors that is displaying. So let's open up our localhost 5173. Let's go to the signup page. It's looking a little big. I think it's because I'm zoomed in at 250%. Let's just zoom in at 150%. And here we go. So we have name, email, and password. So everything looks good. We can open up the console, see if anything, we're getting an error. No, we're not. And that is how we can quickly create the UI of the sign up page, the login page, the verification code, all of that. And like I said, I'm going to have my GitHub repo of this project in the description below. So if you need to copy stuff, copy it. But just remember, you do have to initialize Shadcn. You have to install a few packages. So make sure you're following the video step by step. And the GitHub repo will always be there for your help. Okay, so now that we're done with the UI and the CSS of the sign up page, let's work on the actual logic and being able to sign up and register a user using the front end that is allowed to communicate with our backend server that we just created earlier. So to do this, we need to be able to use a state management library. And there is a few options out there. You probably have heard of Redux. You've heard of the native React use context or create context from React. And we're going to use Zustand. So Zustand is a state management library, and it doesn't wrap a provider around the whole application, because providers can actually make your performance of the app less performative. And now the Zustand only uses the hooks. So this allows you to create custom hooks, and then you could use these hooks inside of any files that you would like to access the state globally. So you want to access the state globally and not just locally that is within a single component. And we also don't want to drill prop into a bunch of components as well. We just want to be able to call this hook, access the state, and use it within the component. So to do this, you could go to zustand.docs.pmnd.rs, and you could read up on the documentation to get better understanding of Zustand. But all you have to do is you have to install the package npm install Zustand. So we're going to do that. And you have to install this package on the front end. So open up your terminal and then just run npm install Zustand. And then after that, we are going to create what they call as a store. So a store is going to be inside of the source folder inside of the front end. It's going to be a folder called store. And inside of that, we're going to create a file called, we're going to call this auth store.js. And what we're going to do here is we're going to pretty much define our state and our state setters. So we're going to import create from Zustand like that. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a function. So export const use auth store. And it is very important to use the word use, because this is what every hook uses in React, like use state, use effect, and any custom hooks you create, you must use the word use in front of the function. So it's use auth store, and it is going to equal create, the thing we reported at the top. And this gives us access to the set. So set allows us to set our state. So it's like a setter. So what we're going to do first is we're going to make the initial state and define it. So for the user, initially it's going to be null. We're also going to have a is loading. So we could show loading state, and initially this will be false as well. We're going to have error. This is going to be null. We're going to have is authenticated. This is going to be a false initially. And we're going to have is checking auth. And this is going to be true because we are checking it at the beginning. Okay, so after this, what we could do is we could create functions inside of this function, and we can name the function based on what we're doing. So we are signing up and registering the user, so we're going to call this sign up. And this is going to be a synchronous function. And this is going to take in the email, the password, and the name. This is going to be an arrow function. And what we could do is we could use the set keyword to set the state initially. So is loading, we want to turn this to true. And then the error, we're just going to still have it as null. So the initial state. Next is we want to fetch our endpoint that we created in our server. So what we want to do is we want to do a try catch. So we could catch any errors just in case. And what we want to do is we want to do inside of the try, we're going to do a const response equals await, and we're going to use the fetch API. So you could either use the fetch API, which is native, so you don't have to install any packages, or you could use Axios, which does the same thing, but it's a package and a different syntax. So what we can do here is we could define the endpoint, which is going to be this HTTP localhost 3000/API/auth/signup. We're going to be using this multiple times, this beginning base URL. So what we can do is we could just cut this, and at the top, we can create an API_URL, and then it's going to equal what I just cut. So it's the localhost 3000 API auth. So what we could do here is we could use a template literal, and then we could put the API_URL. Let's fix it up here as well. And we could do /signup. So that is the endpoint. And the endpoint is going to now, for the fetch, it's going to have a few options. So initially it is going to have the method, which this method is going to be a post request. It's also going to have the headers of content type of application JSON, and it is going to have a body into JSON stringify the email, the password, and the name. So we have to send data back in a stringified JSON format. And another thing we want to add is we want to add their credentials to include, because we are using cookies, and the only way we can actually include cookies is by adding this specific option right here when we're doing a fetch API. So after we get the fetch API, what we can do is we can say const data equals await response.json. So this is going to be the response that we get back from the server. And if you want to see what the response is, so say if you go to the backend controllers, auth controller, and we go to the sign up function in our backend, this response right here is what we're returning. So we're returning success of true, a message, and the user. So we should get it inside the data. And what we can do is we could just console.log the data. And what we can do here is we could console.log the error. And so now there's going to be a few more things we're going to have to set based on the state, but I want to run this to make sure we are getting the fetch requests done correctly. And what we're going to also do is if you are fetching a specific endpoint or API and it's a different domain, you must be able to have access to course. So course is going to be enabled on the backend, so the index.js. And what you have to do is you have to install the course package. So we're going to do npm I course, and this is going to be on the root layer. And then what we do here is inside of the index.js, we're going to import course. And this is coming from course. And then we're going to use it as middleware as well. So app.use and then course. And course is going to take in a few options. And first, it's going to be the origin. So this is going to be the front end. So it's going to be HTTP local host 5173. And we're also going to do credentials of true, so we could pass cookies as well. So you have to set up this middleware inside of your server for you to be able to fetch the specific endpoint if it's coming from a different domain or server in a sense. So now we're going back to the auth store, and all we're doing is console logging the data. And now we have to actually call this sign up function, right? So right now it's in our store. So we created the store, we initialized the states here with the initial values, and now we have the sign up function using the set, which I call it the setter. And we're not setting the user or anything, we're just setting this initially because I just want to test this console logout. So let's do that first. And how to use this sign up is you're going to have to call this hook inside of the sign up page. So we called the hook import use auth store. And what we can do here is we can say const and then sign up like this equals use auth store. So now we could use this sign up function inside of our handle submit. And also let's just look at this page of what exactly we're doing to store the name, email, and password. So we're using use state and we're setting it in the name, email, and password variable. And how we're doing it is if you scroll down, we have a form. And then we have an input with the on change and a value for the name. We have an input with the on change and a value for the email. And then we have an input for the on change and value for the password. And then the form has an on submit with the handle submit function. And when you call the handle submit function, we could run the await sign up function that we got from this hook. And what we're going to do is we're going to pass the email, password, and name like that. So let's press Control S and save it, and let's test it out. And another really cool thing, you should download your computer. It's called MongoDB Compass. So let me just type it in, MongoDB Compass. It'll pretty much install on your computer, and it becomes a shortcut. You open it, and it'll look something like this. So let me close it from the beginning. It'll look something like this right here. And what you can do is you could get your connection string and paste it here. So to find your connection string, it's this .env, right? So we are going to copy this connection string and we're going to paste it right here. And then we're just going to press connect. And we have access now to the database, right? So we can see all the users in the database. And this is one reason why you don't give out that string, the connection string, to anybody, because anybody could just come into this, look at your database and steal everybody's information or make changes, which you don't want to have happen. So now what we're going to do is we're going to delete this user and test it out. And let's open up our terminals and make sure our backend is running and it's running successfully, and our front end is running and it's running successfully. So now that both of our ports are up and running live, let's refresh this page. And it looks like we have a syntax error. We just accidentally added the parenthesis inside of the auth store. So let's just quickly fix that real quick. We must have added an extra parentheses or something. Let's see. So we have this. Let's see where the error is. It's somewhere in here. I'm not seeing it. Let's see. Set, try, catch. Is it, I didn't pass the error in maybe? And yeah, that's what it was. So I didn't pass the error in. So simple mistakes like that, you can look at the console and try to fix it. So now let's try to register a user. And it's not going to show any success message. All it's going to do is console log the data if it's successful. So we're going to click sign up. And as you can see, we console logging the data. We're getting the message, the success of true, and the user object. And like I said, that is the response that we are sending back from this controller. So it's this right here, this response. So that is working good. Everything is working. So what we can do here inside of the auth store, now we could set more state, right? So after the fetch API is done successfully, we could call the set again. And first, let's set the is loading to false, because if you don't, your loading state is going to run nonstop until the user refreshes the page, which will be pretty annoying. Next, we're going to say is authenticated. We're going to say to true. And then we're going to set the user to the data.user. And the reason why we know that is because we console log the data and we understand there was a user object on it. So we want to store it in the user state. So that's how we do it right there. And now in the catch, so if there's an error, we are going to also set some state, right? So we could do is loading to false. And then we could do the error to the error dot message. And we know it's going to be an error dot message based on the response, and the response had a message object on it as well. And then what we could do is we could console log the error and throw the error as well. So this is the sign up function that we're going to use for the sign up page. And what we're doing is if we want to access other state within this specific file, we are calling the hook right here. And all we have to do is put a comma here and we can access like the is loading. We can also access the error and we can access anything else we are defining in the auth store, right? So what we can do is now we could use this in our code to make it better user experience. So for example, for the button, we could do if it's loading, we show loading, and if it's not, we click sign up. And also for the button, we should have it disabled if it is loading, right? We shouldn't let them click the button multiple times, so that's why we have that. And another thing will be the error. What we can do is right below this div, we could show an error message only if the error is true with this p tag. So that's what it's doing right there. And another thing we could do is after they sign up and is successful, we should take them to the verify email page. This is where they're going to be able to verify the email because they can't do anything else until they verify. So we might as well send them to that page. And what we can do is we can import the use navigate, and this is coming from React Router DOM. And let's initialize this hook. So const navigate equals use navigate. And then we're just going to say navigate. And then we're going to navigate to a page we haven't created yet. So we're going to call it verify-email. Okay, so if it's successful, everything works. We're going to verify it. We're going to send it. And we are going to set all of our state properly up. And what we can do is if you wanted to, you can console log to make sure user is there and all that good stuff. So let's test out one more time. Let's delete the user from our database. And what we can do is let's actually console log the user. So for example, console log it's not letting us do it there. So I don't know why I did a capital either. So we're going to console log the user and see what we get. Okay. So let's test it out again. Let's refresh. So right now the user is null, right? So that's what we're getting the console for. Let's sign up. We create an account. And as you can see, it redirected us to this verify email page at the top here. I know it might be small, but it's localhost 5173/verify-email. It's going to say no routes match location this. Of course not, because we haven't created the page. And now if you look at the actual user, here it is with everything except the password, because we made sure we didn't send the password back to the front end. So now we have access to the user, and then now we could actually check to see if the user is authenticated or not and what pages they should have access to. But the next step is we are going to now be able to create the verify email UI and also the logic for that as well. So we're going to create the verify email UI and the logic, but we're not going to use v0dev, and this video isn't a lot about CSS or UI design. So we're going to use Shadcn and a component called the input OTP. So I'm going to show you guys how that looks. If we look at the components on Shadcn's website, you can see here they have this very clean input OTP that you could do as many numbers as you want, and this is for usually when you have to do verification code or if code gets sent to your phone and you have to verify. So this is perfect for what we need for our use case for the verification. So all you have to do is copy this command and run it in the terminal of your application. Make sure you are also in the front end. So you're just going to do this npx shadcn at latest add input OTP, and it is going to install this component inside of your components folder. So as you can see right here. So after we have that installed, the next thing I want to do is I want to create another route, and this is going to be for the verify email. So that is perfect. Copilot is suggesting we have the path of verify email, which is correct, and the element we need to create a verification email page. So to do that, let's go inside of the pages and a new file called verification email page.jsx. And what we're going to do is we're going to go back to Shadcn. And inside Shadcn, they have examples that you could use. And one of the examples is controlled. So you can use the value and on-change props to control the input value. So we're going to click code, and we're just going to copy this, and we're going to paste it onto our verification email page. And let's remove the use client directive. We can remove this import all, and let's import use state from React. Let's correctly write this in the more modern way. And let's rename this. Let's rename this to verification email page, the function. And let's just go back to the app and make sure we import it real quick. So make sure it's imported at the top, as you can see here, and you should be good to go on the app.jsx page. Let's go back to the verification email page, and let's add a few styles. Let's add a flex call with full MX auto, justify center. Another thing is the input OTP group. Let's add a class name with the MX of auto. So this is margin left and right of auto, and it'll center it depending on the parent's width. So what we have here is we could change this text here. Instead of entering your one-time password, we're going to say enter your verification email code. And what we are going to do is we're going to add a button, so when they click it, that means they could verify their email. So verify email now. Okay, so let's see how this front end looks. Let's run the front end server, npm run dev. Let's open up localhost 5173. Let's refresh the page and see if we have any errors. We have button isn't defined, so we just added that. So let's import it because it is Shadcn button because it's uppercase. And as you can see now, everything looks good. I mean, it looks okay when it comes to styling, but everything is rendering and we have no errors in the console. So now what we want to do is we want to be able, we want to be able to actually verify in our database their account. So to do that, we have to go back to our auth store, and we're going to create a function. So we have the sign up function, and this is where all of our state is stored and initialized. So now we have to create a verify email, and this could be an async function. And what this is going to take in is the code, right? And the code is their 6-digit verification code. And what we're going to do is we're going to set the is loading to true. So that means you can now create some loading state on your front end for your user. And the error is going to be set initially to null. Next, we're going to do a try catch. And we are going to do a fetch request to our backend endpoint. So to do that, await fetch. And it is going to be this specific endpoint. So the API URL, verify email. The method is post. Application JSON data. Credentials include. And we are stringifying the code. So that's going to be in the request body. Next, we could just do const data equals await response.json. And what we could do here is we could set the loading to false. We could is authenticated to true, and the user to the data.user. So that is perfect. And then let's do a set here in the catch to stop the loading state and send an error message. And then we could also console log the error. So everything looks pretty good here. When it comes to the actual verify email function, now we have to use it on the page. So to do that, remember to use Zustand, it is acting like a custom hook. So we must import the custom hook. So it's called use auth state, auth store at the top. And then what we're going to do here is we're going to use what state we want from the auth store. So we have a verify email, which is a function. We also have a state of is loading, which you could use, or error to display an error as well. So we could get these from the hook here. And what we're going to do is on this button, we're going to add an on click. And this on click is going to call a function. So we're just going to say handle submit. I know it's a very generic name, but it works. So const handle submit. This is going to be an asynchronous function because we do have to use the await keyword. We could do a try catch here. And what we can do is we could just await verify email. Actually, there's no point in using a try catch. We're already doing it in the backend. So we're just going to await the verify email. And what we're doing is we're passing back the value. And we're getting the value from the set value on the on change. So this is all done by Shadcn. And all you have to do is copy and paste it from the code base and on their website. Okay, so now we are calling the function and we should be getting the response, right? And we're going to say if there is an error and there is, so we're going to just say if there is no error and there's no loading, right? That means it's done loading and the function is done running. We are going to use toast. So for toast, let me just close this real quick. So if you go to Shadcn, they have a component called toast, or you could use the package React Hot Toast. And this toast you could use by importing the use toast at the top. So let's do Control C. So we're going to import use toast, and then we are going to call this hook. So const toast equals to use toast. And what we can do here is we could do toast, and then it's going to have a title and description. I don't know about this stuff here. So we can say email verified, and your email has been verified successfully. So that is going to pop up if there's no error or there is no loading state. And that is going to happen after this function is ran. So what we could do here is we could add one more closing bracket to make sure everything is good to go. And let's check the console of our application again and make sure everything is good. So they're saying that the import use toast from the add components hooks use toast, there's no file path for that. So I think I did do the wrong import. I was doing what Copilot was suggesting. So import from components, hooks, use toast. Let's see. Let's make sure we are actually using it inside of our actual application. So inside of app.jsx, we have the toaster from components UI toaster. And do we have it inside of here? We do. Next, after that, it says in Shadcn that we can import the use toast from @hooks/use toast. So it is the wrong path. So it's not that one, my fault. It's going to be this one. And then we could use toast as the hook and then just call it like this. That should work. Let's see if there's any other errors we have to fix on our front end. So it looks like there's nothing else. Let's just actually go to the verify email page. That is populating, so everything is good to go. So I'm going to delete the user from the database. And we are going to sign up and we're going to try to verify our email address. So Brett, Brett. Okay, so we signed up. It took us to the verify email, right? So let's check our database. So we have is verified as false, and we have the verification token as 505742. So let's type that in. 505742. Let's inspect and look at the console. And let's click verify email. And as you can see, we have a toast message here, email verified. Your email has been verified successfully. And if we bring over the database, MongoDB database, refresh it, is verified became true. So we were able to now send a verification email and verify it by using our custom client side and our custom server. Okay, so let's work on creating the login page and also the logic for it. So we're going to use v0.dev. We're going to say create a login page that input for email and password. So we're going to see what v0 does and hooks up, and you can see it in real time and how quick it will do it. So it's going to create a login page with fields for email and password using React and Next.js. I'll use the app router, server components, and the Shadcn UI library for styling. Here's a simple and clean implementation. So it's creating the code for us, and then we'll be able to preview it after it is done. So as you can see, here it is. Almost looks like the sign up page. All we have to do is go over to the code, copy it, and we could remove a lot of stuff that we don't need. But we honestly, if anything, let's just copy the sign up page that we did to make it a lot easier so we don't have to keep adding new dependencies. So for the sign up page, let's just get the code, copy. Let's go over to our application in the login page. Let's paste it. Rename the function to login page. Remove the use client directive. And what we are going to do is remove the name input. So we don't need any of this complete div right here. So div class name space y2, we don't need any of that. Okay, so let's just check out the UI and how it looks. So let's go over to login. And it's not going to populate because we have to fix this error. So let's fix it. That should be, let's just remove this. Let's remove the name state. We don't need that anymore. We don't need the user. I think that should be it. Let's check it again. Unexpected token. Oh, and they have this TypeScript for the event, so we don't need that as well. We do need the event though, so let's use that. And now the sign up page, well, it's the login page looks good. Let's just rename that to login. Okay, so now let's go into our auth store since the UI is good, and we can create a login function now as well for updating our state. So we're going to do a login. It's going to be async. It's going to get the email and password. Let's create this arrow function. And first thing we have to do, like we've been doing, is we do a set, and let's set the loading to true and the error to null. Let's run a try catch. And inside of it, let's do response equals await fetch. And then we are going to hit our endpoint that we created, which I think it is a login. Let's just confirm it is a login. So let's hit that endpoint, and it's going to be a post request. And we are sending the request body with the email and password. And let's just make sure we have the right amount of curly braces because something's off right now. So we have that. I think we just have an extra parentheses, which we do. And then let's get the response and store it in a variable called data. We're getting it back as JSON. And then let's also set the state that is loading is false, is authenticated to true, and the user to the data.user. And then what we can do here is we could just do a set loading to false error.message. We can also do a console.error, and we can also throw the error as well, just in case we need to use it. Other than that, that should be good for the login function on the auth store for Zustand for the state management. Now let's go back to the login page and let's use it now. So we're going to say import use auth store, and let's call this hook our custom hook. So we're going to say const, and then we have a login is loading error and user. We don't really need user, so let's just call these for now. And what we are going to do inside the handle submit, we are just going to await login. We're passing in the email and the password. So let's just make sure we're actually calling this handle submit function. So it should be on the form, which is right here, and it's going to call this. So it looks like everything is working good. And let's just do a navigate. So if it's logged in successfully, well, first let's import the hook at the top. So import, it'll be use navigate from React Router DOM. And let's do const navigate equals use navigate. And then let's just navigate to the home page. So if it's successful, it's going to navigate to the home page. And it's saying we can't use await because the function isn't asynchronous. So let's make this handle submit asynchronous. And now everything should be good. We have no errors, and let's test it out. So let's try to log in. And you could also check network so you can see if it's actually being successful or not. And I mean, it was so quick, it gave back a 200. So you see success was true, the message was login successful, and the payload was the email and the password that I did. And we got back a status of 200 and got redirected back to the home page. So I mean, that's how simple it is to create the login route. After you create the register, the login is a lot easier to do, and it only takes 5-10 minutes. Now let's check to see if the user is authenticated or not. So we do have an endpoint for that. So let's go into our code again. And the very first thing we need to do is we need to go to the auth store, and we need to create a function for this. So we can name this function called, let's do comma after this. Let's just do check auth like this. And this function is going to be asynchronous. It is not going to take anything in as an argument. And what we are going to do here is we are going to set the is checking auth to true. Oh, and it did everything for me. And the error to null. Okay. And then what we're doing here is we have a try catch, and we are fetching our endpoint, which is not /me, it's actually check-auth, and it is a GET request. And we could do headers with the credentials include, so we could pass cookies around. And we don't have to pass any body because there's nothing to pass back. Then we are going to store the response and the data. And what we're going to do is checking auth to false, is authenticated to true, and user will be the user data.user. And then we have the catch, and we're checking if auth is false, is authenticated is false, and user is null. So, I mean, that is, Copilot did a lot for me there, but that is pretty much the same thing we've been doing for all of these functions here. And now we could use this check auth anywhere we want inside of our application. So to do that, let's go to our app.jsx file, which is our main file. And let's just do an import of use auth store. Let's call this hook. So is checking auth. We have check auth, which is the function we created, is authenticated to see if they're authenticated or not. And we also have the user. So we could use these four depending on how we want to do it. And what we can do here is we could call a use effect. So use effect, so when the page loads on the initial mount, what we can do is we could check the auth. So we could call the function check auth. I don't know why we have these extras right here. I'm missing, there we go. So we have check auth, and what we can do is we have to pass it in as a dependency like that, or you're going to get an error, a pure dependency error. And what we are doing is we're just calling the check auth function in here, and then we could just console log the user, and we can console log is authenticated. And this is going to be on the home page. So let's test this out and see if everything is working correctly. So this check auth function is going to get called right when this hits. And this function we created here, which we are doing a GET request to our endpoint. So let's test it out. Okay, so use effect, it is saying that we have a space here in between the arrow. So that's not going to work. So let's look at it again. Okay, let's go to the home page. And what we can do is go to the console and see what it says. So let's refresh. And as you can see, the very first literally milliseconds, it's null, false, null, false, null, false. And then it finds out that there is a user logged in. And if it's authenticated, we put true. And you know that we're logged in too. If you go to your application tab here, you look at cookies and we have a token. So for example, if I delete the token, go back to the console, let's refresh. It's not, even though we have it true, we need to make sure that when there's no token and when we log out, we need to create the logout endpoint, that the is authenticated, it becomes false. So I manually deleted it. That's why it still says true, but it can't find a user because we don't have the token. So now that is how you're going to check for the authentication, and you could protect pages like that. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So let's quickly go back to the check auth function inside the auth store, because there is a mistake I just did. And obviously now I'm correcting it because I looked back and saw what was going on. Inside of the check auth function, no matter, obviously we're always going to get a response because we're going to see if they're authenticated or not. And the way the code is set right now is it's always going to set is authenticated to true no matter what, even if there's a user or not. So what we have to do is we have to do an if check here. So after we get the data, we know that there is a data.user object, right? And what we can do here is if there is no token, that means there's going to be no data.user object. So we could do a check. We could say if there is a data.user, right? We can use a setter function and we could say set is authenticated to true, user to the data.user, and is checking auth to false. And then we could do an else. And then in this else, we could set is authenticated to false because that means there's no user. The user is null and the is checking auth is false. And what the is checking auth is, its primary purpose is it is going to allow us to set up a loader. So it's like it is loading state, but instead we're is checking auth. So obviously we set it true here, so we could show a loader while it's checking. And when it's done checking if it's authenticated or not, we could stop the loader. So this is a quick fix that you must do inside the check auth for it to work properly for the protected routes and to navigate to a different page. So now let's go into our app.jsx and let's now check our authentication and protect routes. So what we're going to do is inside of the function app, the only things we actually need is the isCheckingAuth, the check auth, the logout, so we could log out users, and this is going to be on every page at the top, and the user. So we could dynamically render if this logout button should be there or not. Now above the app function, what we can do is we could create a protected route function. So we're going to say const protected route. And what this is going to take in as a argument is the children, right? So we are going to wrap this function inside of an actual page. So you're going to understand how this actually works. So this is going to be a const, and we have to get the is authenticated and the user from the useauth store. And the reason why we have to do this again is because a function has its own scope, its own local scope, and we're not able to access it from here. So we have to run it again and call the hook. So now we could do a check. So we're going to say if is not authenticated. And we could say there is no user. Then we could run pretty much we could re-navigate the user to a certain page. We could use navigate, and this is coming from React Router DOM. And we're going to navigate to the login page. And what we can do is we replace the current page they're on with this replace option, and then we navigate to the login page. So if they're not logged into, like for say the dashboard where only members could be on, then it's going to check to see if they're not authenticated or not, and then it's going to navigate to the login page. Else, we're just going to return the children, which is going to be the dashboard page. So what we can do is in your pages, you're going to create a dashboard page.jsx, create a real quick React function. And then down here, we're going to create another route. We're going to call this dashboard page. And you're going to make sure you import this at the top, dashboard page. And then this is going to be /dashboard. And now what we can do here is we can actually wrap this dashboard page with the protect route. Right? So we called it protect route. And what we can do is we could put the dashboard page in between both of these, and this will act as the child now. So now we could do, if we are logged in and authenticated, we should be able to access the dashboard page. And let's just make sure we have everything set up. Okay, so what we need is an equal sign. We're missing an equal sign for the protect route function. So just like that, everything should work now. Let's refresh the page. And if we go to the application, we don't have a token. So let's just try to go to the dashboard page. If we go to the dashboard page, it should just redirect us back to the login, which it did. Now let's log in. And now we're logged in and we have a token, right? Now let's try to go to the dashboard page. And now we have access to the dashboard page with the logout button. So the protected route is working. And the other thing we could do is if they're logged in, we don't want them to be able to go to like the login page. So right now I'm logged in. I shouldn't be able to see this page because I'm logged in, or you shouldn't see the sign up page. So what we can do is we could create another function right below the protected route. We could call this const authenticated user route. We could name it whatever you want. This is going to take in the children, and it's going to be the same concept as the function above. What we are going to do is we're going to take in the children. We are going to call the useauth store. And if the user is authenticated and there's a user, we're just going to navigate to the dashboard. And then if not, we're going to return the children. So if the user is authenticated, which means you're logged in, we should just navigate straight to the dashboard. So if we're trying to go to, say, the sign up page, let's just do authenticated user route. And what we're going to do here is we're going to put the sign up page in the middle to act as the child. And we're going to do the same thing for the login page. So authenticated user route, put the login page as the child. Let's Control S to save it. And now let's test it out. So this is the authenticated user route and the protect route. So the protect route is to protect certain routes if the user is not authenticated. And the authenticated user route is to make sure an authenticated user doesn't go to like a login or sign up page. So for example, we're logged in, right? Let's go to the login page and we should be redirected right to the dashboard. If we go to the sign up page, we are redirected right to the dashboard. If we delete, well, let's not delete it. Let's just log out. And now let's try to go to the sign up page. We could go there. And now if we try to go to the dashboard page, we are redirected to the login. So that is how you can protect routes by checking the authentication with our endpoint we created in the server and then implementing it onto the client side. Another thing you might notice is, for example, if we are logged in and you're on the home page, I'm console logging the user. If I refresh the page, you could see it says null, 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 and then it gives us the user. It gives us the user object here. So for the first few milliseconds, it is taking a little bit of time to query the database to see if there's a user. So what we have to do is we have to use that is checking auth as a loading state to show a loader. And then whenever the authentication comes back and it's checked, and if it's true or not, then we could show like the logout button. So for example, if we go to the code, if we scroll down here, all we have to do is take this is checking off and we run an if statement right above the return. So if is checking auth is true, we can return a loader, and all I'm doing is a div saying loading. So the way this works is in the auth store, when we check the auth, we set it to true. It does its fetch request, and then it sets the is check into false no matter what after the fetch request is done. So that means the loading state of this will stop and it will display the return no matter what. So that is another key thing. Just realize when you're having a synchronous function that sometimes it could take a few milliseconds to even a few seconds, depending on the user's computer, to actually get a response back from the server. Okay, so now on the dashboard page, I want to display some of the user information. So I'm going to show you guys how to do that. It's very simple. And like I said, we're not going to style it too much. So it looks like we are logged in. So let's go to the dashboard page, which is a protected route. Let's go inside the dashboard page and we can import the use auth store from the path. And then what we can do is we could get the user from here using the use auth store. And we could also get is checking auth as well. Okay. So we could do the loading state. If is checking auth, we could just return a loading div. And if not, we could just do the dashboard with the H1. We could be like dashboard page. And then what we can do below it is how to access specific things inside the user. You can console log the user to see what's in the user. But for example, we could do a p tag. And then we could say welcome. And then it'll be user.name. And then it'll be something like this. So as long as there is a name property, this will display the user's name. And like I said, if you want to check to see if there is a name property, all you have to do is just do a console log of the user and see what you get in the console. So for example, let's console it. And like I said, nulls, and then we have the name, email is verified, and the underscore ID. So we can say like welcome Brett. We could do another p tag saying user.email. Your email is, and then that. So we can see how that looks as well. Your email is, and then it shows the email. So, I mean, there's a lot of personal information you could show to the user on the dashboard to make the dashboard page more custom and dynamic for the user experience. So that is very easy to get the user information from the database and display it onto the client side. So the very last thing we need to implement is the forgot password UI and logic. So the user can actually request a password reset and successfully reset their password just in case they forgot. So the very first thing we need to do is let's create a new route. So I'm in the app.jsx. I am going to press Shift Alt down, and the route path is going to be forgot-password. And we are going to create a page called forgot password page. Okay. And then you could create it here inside of your pages. So it's forgot password page.jsx. You're going to create a page, and we are going to go over to v0.dev. So all I did was type in create a form for a forgot password. Only input should be for email. It tells me what it did. It shows me the code, and then it shows me the preview. So this is how our forgot password page is going to look. So they could enter their email, get an email sent to this email to reset their password. And then a link will be sent. They click it, and then they're able to reset their password. And if you look at the code, it is set up for Next.js. It is optimized for Next.js, and it uses some components that we don't want to use. So for example, like the use form hook, we don't want to use resolver, which is for TypeScript, checking types. We're also not going to use the form as well. And we're not going to use the alert and the alert description. So I already took out all the fluff, and I already copied and pasted it into the forgot password page and removed what needed to be removed so it could get working. So instead of having all of that code, you can go to the GitHub repo and just copy and paste the forgot password page into your project so you can follow along. But all we're doing is we are going to get controlled state, and we're going to set the email to the email variable, and it's inside a form with the onSubmit, calling the onSubmit function, which is right here. And it's going to be an asynchronous function, and it's just doing a e.prevent default. So that's all this page is doing. And then obviously it's looking like a forgot password page. So if we go to it and we go to the forgot password page, so refresh it, we have no errors, and the forgot password page looks like this. So next, we actually need to create the logic for the forgot password page. So to do that, we can go inside of the auth store, and let's create a forgot password function. It's going to be asynchronous, and it's going to accept email as the argument because that's what they're going to send to us. So we could send them an email. And now we need to call the endpoint that we created for our server. So first, let's set the is loading to true and the error state initially to null. Okay, so after that, let's do a try catch, and let's call our endpoint. So we're going to say const response equals await fetch. We're going to call the endpoint, which is forgot password. This is going to be a post request, and we're sending back the email inside the request.body. So it's going to look something like that. Next is, let's add another. We have an extra parenthesis here for some reason. So next we are going to say const data equals await response JSON. So we're going to store the response in the data variable. And then after we do this, we could use the setter function to set the state to is loading to false. And we can also set the is loading to false and the message to the actual message, right? So what we can do here is, do we have message up here? So we don't. We could put message as null up here, and then you could send a message back. But for now, we could just do is loading to false like that. So all it's going to do is send back an email, and it's going to send an email to the user, and it's going to send a success of true and a message. And if you want to know how I know that, it's because if we go back to our auth controller, we look at the forgot password function, and if you see what's sending back as the response, it's success of true with the password reset email sent successfully. So if you wanted to, you could get the data.message and display it somewhere. But for us, that's not a big deal. All you got to do is just get the data, console log it, and you can see it's data.message. So if you console log, let's console log data.message, because that is the response we're storing in here. And then for the catch, let's do the set here too, is loading to false and the error to the error message, and we could console log the error. And like I said, if you really want to show the message, you come up here. We could initialize the message as null. And then in the forgot password right here after the function is called, we're going to add this message, and then it'll be data.message. Okay, so now let's go to the forgot password page. Let's import the hook so we can use it. And then let's initialize the hook and what state we want to use. So we're going to use the forgot password. We're going to do the message that we just created. And this is going to come from the use auth store. And what we can do here is we could call this function. So we're going to do await forgot password, and we're passing in the email, and we're getting it from this event object here. And then you can also do right above this button, we can do if message is true, we could just show message like that. And that's going to be the message we get from the response, which is password reset sent successfully. So everything should work. And the last thing I want to do is, it makes sense to do it, is inside the app.jsx, we are protecting all of the routes. So if a user is already logged in, they shouldn't be able to go to the forgot password page. So let's wrap this forgot password page with the authenticated user route. So that means if the user is authenticated, they're not going to be able to access this page, just like they can't access the login or sign up page. Okay, so everything looks good. Now let's test it out. We can refresh. Everything looks good. Let's type in our email and reset the password. So as you can see, there's the message, password reset, email sent successfully. We're displaying it, and we're also console logging it. And if we go to our email, you can see that we get the password reset link here. We click it, and it goes to localhost 5173, reset password, and then with the token at the end. So we haven't created this page, so that's why you don't see anything, and it looks like it's broken. But that's going to be the next step of us creating this page and allowing them to actually reset the password. Okay, now we're actually going to reset the password in our database so the user can have a fresh new password that they can actually log into now. So very first thing I want to do is I want to create the function so we could actually call our endpoint of our backend. So we're going to call this reset password, and we're inside of our auth store. It's going to be asynchronous. And what we're going to do is we are going to get the token and the password, right? That's what we're getting inside of this function. And now we are going to do the set. We are going to set the is loading to true and the error to null. And next we're going to do a try catch. And inside of the try catch, first thing is we're going to call our endpoint, right? So to call our endpoint, let's do const response equals await and then fetch. And that is going to be the endpoint that we're calling. So this is the base URL and then dash reset password. And then we have the token that is added on the end of the URL like this. And we're getting it from the parameters, right? So we're passing in here. And then this response, it's going to be of method of post. It's going to be a post request, headers, content type application, credentials is included, and we are sending the password back and the body. So that's all we're doing. This is how our response looks. And if you always want to see how the endpoint looks, because this one is a little more difficult per se than just a basic endpoint, we could go to our server, go to our routes, and we have this base URL and then / reset password and then the / dynamic token. So then if you look at it, how we're calling it on our front end, it's the same exact way. Base URL / reset password and then the / dynamic token. Okay, and then after we call this specific endpoint, what we can do is we could just say const data equals response.json. And we could see what we are getting back from the response by seeing what we're sending back. So let's go to the reset password. And what we're doing is we're sending a success of true and a message of password reset successfully. So let's go back to our auth store. And what we can do is we could do a setter, right? And we can set is loading to false and the message to the data.message. And then we could do the catch. We could set this to loading to false, error to error message. We could also console log the error. And then we can also throw a new error as well. Okay, so this is the whole function that we're going to call when we submit on the front end. So the person is going to type in their new password, and they're also going to do another input that confirms the password. So that means they have to type in the new password twice so they for sure know it's the correct one they typed in. So we are done creating the function that's going to be called on submit. Now what we have to do is create a reset password page, right? So we have a reset password page.jsx. And all I did was I went to the forgot password page. I pressed Control-A, copied it, and then came to the reset password page and pasted it here. Changed the function name to reset password page. And then all you're going to do is change the input. The input was email, and the state, you're going to change this to password and set password. And the initial state's an empty string. And then we're also going to have another state, which is going to be confirm password and set confirm password. And that's going to be an empty state as well. So we can have another input, and it's going to be the same thing almost, except it's just confirm your password. And then right here it'll be confirm password for the value. And then it will be set confirm password to change the actual state. So these are controlled inputs, changing the state and storing it in the event object. In the onSubmit function, let's have an e.prevent default so the page doesn't reload on us. And everything else looks pretty good. So now let's actually create this route inside of our app.jsx. In our app.jsx, we could have the page right here. It's going to be a route. I just copied and pasted this down, and I changed the path to reset password and then / the dynamic token like this. So you have the semicolon, then token. And then the element is going to be the reset password page, right? So you have the reset password page that we just created inside of the pages folder, and make sure it is imported at the top right here so you don't run into an error. So when we go to this page, you're going to be able to see this specific page component here. And the way we go to this page is after they click the link in the email, this is the path that they're going to, obviously with the token that we created for them in the server. So now what we can do is we could go back to the reset password page. And first we need to actually retrieve the from the parameter. So what we can do is we could use params. And this is coming from React Router DOM. And what we can do here is we could do const and destructure the token from the use params. And if you want, you can console log the token, and it will be the token that is associated in the URL. And then obviously we have the password and confirm password in our state. So let's work on the onSubmit function. So what we're going to do is we're going to say if password doesn't equal the confirm password, let's just send an alert message saying passwords do not match and do a return. And then next, what we can do is we are going to call the reset password function. So to do that, we need to import the use auth store. So we could use that hook. Let's initialize the hook and say what states we want to use. We could do the reset password and the message. So we could display the message too. And then after this, if that sounds good, we're going to do await reset password. And we have to do it in the order that we're passing it in, or the values will be mixed up. So we're taking in the token first, then the password. So we have to do the same way that we do there. So for the reset password, it'll be the token, then the password. So perfect. And then what we can do down below is right above the button, we could do a dynamic value. So if there's a message, If message is true, the message that we're getting from the state, from the hook, then we could display a p tag with text screen of the message. And the message should be whatever we are sending back in the response. And if we look at the controller and we look at the reset password, the message is password reset successfully. So we should see that after it is successful. Okay, so other than that, everything looks pretty good. Let's look at how this page is actually going to look on the front end. So to do that, all we have to do is refresh this page, and this is the forgot password. So let's do my email. So saying we forgot the password, we're going to reset the password. We got an email sent to us successfully. We're going to look at the email. We're going to click here to reset your password. And now we are on that specific route where we enter your password and confirm the password. So what we're going to do is we're going to inspect, and we can open up the network tab to see if we're getting the correct status back and if everything worked fine. So I'm going to change the password to 12345, 12345, and we're going to click reset password. And we got a status of 200 back. We can see the payload that I'm sending back. We can see the response, and we can see that the status was 200, and we got the success message back. So just to test it to make sure it works, let's go to the login page and try to log in with the old password. So I'm going to do the 123456, try to log in. And as you can see, log in, we had 400 bad requests. So automatically it just redirects us to the home, which you can do a fix on that. If the message was unsuccessful, you should stay on the login page. But if we go back to the login page and we type in the new password, 12345, and click sign up, as you can see, we do get a 200 request on this login endpoint. We have the payload of the new password, login successful. And if we go to the dashboard page, we are welcomed with our information. And if we also look at the application tab, you can see that we have the token as well that is authenticating us. So that is it for the MERN course. Here for this video, you have learned how to create both the backend server and the front end, where a user can now register for an account, get an email to verify their email. They could verify their email so they could actually log in. Now they could log in, and now we could show them a dashboard with their information on it. They could also log out, and they could also have the ability to reset their password. So this is a full authentication system. Obviously, you could customize it and make it a lot better than this video is here for your specific application use. So for example, you could show a lot better success messages, error messages. You could make the styling look a lot better. But this video is definitely a very, very good building block on what you should build upon and how to create a legit authentication system. So if you like this 3 to 4 hour video, hit that like button and also subscribe for more content just like this, because I do want to come out with videos like this that are really long, where it's 3 to 4 hours and pack a ton of value into it. So if you did like it, hit that like button. It'll mean a lot to me. This video did take a while to record, but other than that, if you guys have any questions, leave them down below in the video and I'll get to them soon. Thanks for watching.